to D&D Play 20. Who are we? A bunch of really cool people that like to play games that are very supportive of each other
I'm not cool.
and who are a great community. So if you want to join that, there'll be a link on chat for you to join our Discord community. Now, who are we the ones you see here? Well, this is Legends of Methis, my homebrew campaign in my homebrew world. I am Vagabunda or Kickbutt DM, or Mariana, depending how you know me. And these are my amazing players. And I'm gonna have them introduce themselves. So I will roll for it.
Oh no.
Actually, I want you all to roll initiative.
Oh, Mom. Okay.
That's two.
Where's the initiative
Two.
button?
By the way,
Ooh, my dice are pink. 12.
Two. Have I added modifiers or just straight roll?
no, just initiative. Modifiers.
Okay.
Like you're rolling actual initiative.
4.
Okay,
Wait, I
so
have advantage. That's in fact.
ready there.
14.
All right, Nix,
No, it's 12.
you can introduce yourself.
Hello, I am Raza playing Nyx Reedfellow. She is a smart cookie who is a long way from home and trying to solve all the world's problems. She is a rock gnome slash halfling from the Port of Grace, artificer, uh, alchemist extraordinaire to be, and we'll pass it on to her number one, well, one of her patients. She almost got in trouble. Cinder.
Hi, I'm Peter. I play Cinder Marut. And I am incredibly gross, but not as gross as Cole. I play a sorcerer of the divine nature so far. And I think that's it.
Yeah.
I
So
pass it to Sir Jonathan.
Hi. My name's Jonathan. I play Lorcan, Stronghammer, and he is just down from his house actually. He's at home almost basically. He is a brass dragonborn, and he loves just chumming it up with his mate Nexus at the moment.
Who is his mate Nexus?
Good question. Would you like to explain the character that you're playing?
Yeah, I'll explain the fourth member of this party, an NPC. Nexus, looks like a brass dragonborn, but his parents are a white dragonborn and a red half dragon. It's kind of confusing. And he is a barbarian with a homebrew subclass that has a bromance with his best mate and is infected by the same condition Cinder is. And with that, I shall start by distributing inspiration to Cinder for wearing the correct background. And I'm distributing everyone reroll points because someone subscribed this week.
Yay!
That also means there is going to be a karma card in play, which we're going to go into in a minute.
Another one.
Well, yes, quite a few interesting ones. You guys have a few ones in play.
Still.
Yes. I believe so. Let me double check that I'm not saying.
Oh,
Yeah.
instant level. That was what it was.
No.
Worth a shot.
I think you're just not recalling, but No take backs.
All right. So, who wants to do the recap?
I was wondering what
Shouldn't,
Comcast was.
shouldn't the DM do the recap? It's been like 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
It's been 2 weeks. If you don't want to do the recap, I'll do the recap, but
That's fine.
you
I
won't
was
get a
just
reroll
wanting.
point.
I wanted to see if the DM would oblige or not. That's fine.
I'm happy to oblige. Just you don't want the reroll point? That's fine by me.
No, I didn't say that.
Yeah,
I
he
just thought
doesn't
because it was
want
a long period of time. Hey, I'll do it. It's fine. All right. So, without further ado, welcome to Nix's Corner, or Nix's Notes, where last time we were embroiled in a bit of family drama. We met Nexus's mom, who's a very badass half-dragon gladiator, Akra, who loves her son so much that she beat him to pulp when he came home. But she adores Lorcan. Just absolutely adores the man. And so, meanwhile, while we were dealing with Akra and her sweet reunion with Nexus, Lorcan went home to his parents, Baroneth, Stronghammer, and Rudvik. And we all caught up eventually. And Akra, again, it's very sweet on Lorcan. Cinder did provoke her, which was unwise, but somehow he survived to live the tale. And then, if things couldn't get more interesting, we met Nexus's father, Ankar Bakrath, the most undesirable snooty man that Nyx has ever seen or heard of yet. He came in and just disrespected everyone that wasn't on his level. Power seems to have gone to his head after his promotion to the council. So after that drama unfolded, it was discussed that different ways of traveling to where they need to go, to the wastelands. I believe Akra gave the group a map and instructed them which ways are which, how long each way is going to take. Nexus and his father went to a separate room, and when Nyx and the rest of the party went to check on him, it turned out that his father had told Nexus that he was planning to do away with Akra, that his investment had paid off and that he didn't need her anymore, that he had some other kind of backing that would be enough for him, for his aspirations. He threatened Nexus and told him that if he told her, things will go south very quick. So he needed to keep his mouth shut. But he was his son, so he expected absolute obedience from him. So the party decided to undermine him after hearing rumors of potential association with the brothel and problems of the brothel. Nyx, took one for the team and asked Akra and Baroneth about it. And they told her that the brothel in question was the Red Velvet. No, not the Red Velvet. Was it?
The Velvet
It was the
Touch.
Velvet Touch. I don't know why I keep saying Red Velvet. Doesn't make sense. And
You want the cake?
it was that one's catchy. And they set off, but not before Cinder had other plans. By going in and revealing this nefarious plot to Akra about her dearly beloved, who she really didn't want to believe, but she didn't outright dismiss Cinder. As he finished up his business, he went to catch up with the rest who had arrived at the Velvet Touch, and Nexus had named her Lorcan, and there was a lot of hubbub who was going to go in. In the end, it was Lorcan, right? That went in?
Yeah.
Lorcan went in. And Nyx went in as well by applying her talent at transmutation, offering her services to anyone that, and anyone's taste.
Yes, yes.
So
That's
I
gonna go
believe that is
well.
where we left off. Nyx is nuts.
I think that's very, very good indeed.
Mm.
And that warrants a.
Well done. Yes, well done.
Where have the karma cards gone?
They're all there.
Oh, I turned
I'm-
them off on the map, but
Oh, how?
Oh. Yes.
next to the last.
Hi, gotcha.
Yeah.
That's the ones I want. Not these ones. Ah!
What
Not
one?
no! I am terrible at this.
Right.
Right. There you go. It's been awarded. So we are going. Cinder is on his way. And Larkin and Nyx go in. Nyx is staying outside. So
And that triggers a karma card. Woo!
that does trigger a karma card. That's a good point. Before I go anywhere. Let's see what you guys got. Rough Pocket. Submitted by Greg from Save vs. Games. The old lady selling pastries looked so kind and innocent, but the pie she sold you must have gone bad. What was in that thing? Your max HP is reduced to half until the end of a long rest.
You what?
This is great because you're about to, if you choose to fight, you're gonna die. You make with new energy. You gain 15 temporary hit points from getting such a nice break. That's the positive. You hope to see the old lady again to ask her what exactly was in those pies.
Down.
Everybody has half their max HP.
Me.
Now, I am going to add a thing here. Because you guys, what level are you guys? 6, yes. Oh, you don't have it. You can't. You don't even have it. Hold on.
What's half of 55? 25, 22.
It's 22. Yes. I am going to allow people. It's a bit mean with what's about to happen.
Oh no.
So I'm going to allow you guys to, if with the help of things like lesser restoration, and it's basically this effect will count as poisoned. So if you're willing to give up the temporary HP the next day, you can, if you have lesser restoration, you can restore yourselves to your normal max HP, but you won't get the benefits after the long rest.
Let's wait and see. Well, I do have lesser restoration, but
Nyx has always got a lesser restoration flask ready to go. It's fine.
yeah, if we're
Okay,
close
so-
to dying.
All right.
Right, 34 max HP. Oof.
Mine's 25.
This is not.
Wait,
So
I think
this is
we
still
had
more
8
than
on
double
us.
than the next version.
You
Because
did have 8.
34.
so, okay, so
It 8 increases your max HP. So if you had changed it, it's the same. It's half with 8 anyway. The 8 doesn't disappear.
No.
It's half of
Okay.
your total with 8.
Wait, did we get Aiden?
Yeah.
oh, so it's half of our regular max, and then we get the aid, or aid is
No.
cut in half as well.
The 8 is cut in half as well because
Okay.
it
'Cause it's
has
part of your
you've
max
already,
HP.
Yeah, you've already been
Alrighty.
aided.
Works
All
for me.
right, and with that, we are going to check out how you guys come in. So,
Where is the front entrance? Oh, it must
That
be
is-
right there.
Where?
I think
Where
it's
you
right
can-
here.
It is indeed. So we're going to put everybody's characters on there. Cinder's coming. Cinder, you're a few minutes behind for now.
Yep.
Nexus is waiting outside.
I'll be
And
peeking in
Larkin.
windows.
Larkin.
Oh, careful of that.
Well, there's a bathtub here.
Do you wanna, Nix and Larkin, do you wanna put yourselves on the map or do you want me to?
Oh, sorry.
You
Yeah,
can
I'll
have
do it.
yourself sit here.
I'm looking at NPCs.
Yeah, so where are we?
Yeah,
Wow.
inside.
No. Alright. Wow.
So
Oh,
you are
look,
inside.
there's a toilet.
And
I'm pretty sure you can't see that.
No, I can't, but Peter the player can see it, and I just realized Cinder hasn't used the bathroom this whole campaign.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, he has, but
No wonder he's bursting at the seams.
oh my god.
Oh no.
Please no. Alright, so you guys come in and for some reason it's not showing. You guys don't see this token here, do you?
No.
Wow.
Which one?
Across the desk from you guys.
No, we don't. No, we don't see it. No.
It seems to be on a layer that I don't have access to right now.
Really?
Yes.
That's
The
So
ethereal plane.
it's somewhere. Let's forget about it now because Roll20 doesn't like me. So there's a guy there that opened the door to you. He's a dragonborn, and he basically, well, once you guys come in, he closes the door that you guys came in through, and opens this one for you guys to go through.
Thank you.
And as you're about to go through, he puts a hand on your shoulder, Larkin. It goes, far end of the room to the right,
Thank you.
and goes around and sits back around the desk and looks at you, Nix, and goes, "For you, miss. For you." Sorry.
Right now she looks. God.
He looks, "For you, miss. The boss wants to see you when you go out the door, straight left and all the way to the private corner."
She nods. Right now she looks like a sultry green dragonborn. She winks at him. As she turns, it's taken all her self-control to do this, by the way. I'm gonna be rolling wisdom saves in a minute.
Oh,
So which way did he say? Which way?
When you go
Sorry?
out the door, straight to the left, all the way to the private corner.
Gotcha. Thank you. Alright.
good luck.
So over here.
Yes.
Alright, gotcha.
Right, so I'll head on in.
Yes, you can head in.
Next, good luck, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 1 second.
Am I still
really?
disguised as a pregnant dragonborn woman?
That is up to you.
Actually,
You
sorry.
took you stopped the disguise or changed it to talk to Akra. I think
Okay.
when you were
so
trying to warn her.
I'm just my normal decaying self then.
I
Okay.
don't think so. I think you just changed it. Maybe you did. I didn't actually take notes of that. I apologize. I'm a terrible DM.
No, you're not. Don't
Right.
say that.
Did I continue in?
Just one second. I'm just
Yep.
checking something to make sure I didn't mess it up. No, it's fine. Yeah, it's like that. All right. You guys can come in. Yeah. You've been advised where to go. As you come in, however, it is bustling. There are loads of people inside. The main people that stick out to you are the tokens that you have on the map. So on the private corner, this private corner, you see a black dragonborn clearly keeping an eye on everything that is happening. You see this lady uh, going around talking to the customers and settling them in. You have this lady doing a performance of singing. You have oh my god, really? You have this one performing a dance, and it's all happening at the same time. There's loads of scents of perfumes and incense mixed in the
What
air.
time
There's
is this?
music. It's not nighttime. This is about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
And you can see, Lorcan, that this is surprisingly, this from what you've heard, this used to be a brothel where guards and stuff used to go to.
Yeah.
You don't spot a single one. You spot more high-end people from the inner wall.
Oh. Going up in the place.
And at the end of the room, to the right, at the far end of the room to the right, just as the gentleman said, you spot your acquaintance.
Great. Oh, by the way, there's 2 of that token, Black Dragon.
Which one?
The blue one.
Oh, blue. What?
This one and that one.
This one. There's 2 of it?
This one.
Ah.
It's a twin.
There's
It's
meant to
fine.
be 3.
Oh, right, okay.
They're
It's like
generic.
triplets.
They're basically generic tokens.
Alright.
I thought they were twins. That's fine.
Triplets? No.
Now it is. Canon. Right, so, Lorcan will start moving over and say, Nix, good luck. I don't know what you're planning.
He's like taking deep breaths. She's like a little shaky. She's like, just nods. She goes, good luck.
Right. And Lorcan will head over to where she is.
Alright. Alright. As you approach, you see she seems a little uncomfortable. Which is not usual for her. And she sat on this she's waiting for you. As you approach, she sits on the couch. As if you were one of the customers.
Alright. I'm trying to find where her character sheet is.
I will show it to everyone, actually. What she looks like.
Me. Chiara.
I cannot remember how to say the name.
It's Chiapo.
Yarple. Okay.
Is it-
Yarple. Lovely to see you again.
Hi, Lorcan. What brings you here? Thought you didn't like this place.
Well, I've been away for a long time.
Oh,
Been about a month now, I think.
that sounds about right. Haven't seen you in a while.
Yes, we've been doing a few things up and down. There's been a few issues with what would you call them? Creature sightings, I think.
Oh, you mean the rumors from Swiona?
Yes.
That was you?
Well, we were around there. That was Swiona, wasn't it? That we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we were in there.
Oh my.
Ghost
You see
said
that she
that
starts,
Jonathan's mic is really low.
you hear that she starts to look like you notice. Actually, what is your passive insight?
And my passive insight? Good question. 11.
Then you feel free to roll me insight.
Ah, okay. I thought you were just gonna say, "Nah, you
If-
failed."
You got nothing. Oh.
Yeah, if you want it. Yeah.
No, I will gladly roll insight with my +1. Yes, which is a total of 4.
No, you're fine. You see that she seems a
You're
little
fine.
tense. Yeah, you see that she seems a little tense, but maybe it's because you're at her work. She goes, what brings you here?
Well, we're in a bit of a situation. I thought you might be able to help us a bit.
She looks around. You mean you're here for a private session?
Am I?
She looks. You see her eyes dart in the room between the other girls around the brothel.
Yes, yes, I am. And yes, I think so.
All right, follow me. And she starts making her way to this room. Here, that's the door.
I will follow a bit gingerly, but yes.
She opens the door for you to go in.
Thank you.
And as she goes in, she closes the door. And we're going to go to Nick's for a second.
Thank you.
No, you really don't have to.
Children,
Nick.
cover your ears.
She's perfectly fine, just stalling over here. Right? She's like, she had priorities, but she's just trying to make herself inconspicuous. Actually, that's what she's actually trying to like to see if they're like talking, and she'd be like approaching to see if she can catch anything. In the meantime,
The moment you step through the door,
There's a door.
Uh-oh.
these door with Lord
those doors though, yeah.
This dragonborn has been eyeing you carefully.
No.
Okay,
Wow.
As you approach tentatively, what is your passive perception?
A lot better than mine.
22.
Yeah. As soon as you started to approach,
That's what
you've
they
noticed
tend
it
to,
gone quiet.
Learn quiet. She's just standing there. Wisdom save. If you allow me.
Go for it. It's your turn.
Not too bad. Yeah, that's fine. That was a 15. So she like psychs herself up. She's like, I got this. Think of Cinder, think of next. She's got to think. She goes, in a most sultry voice, "Hi there," to the boss.
To the black dragonborn?
She assumes by her stance that she's the one that they meant that she's the one in charge.
You see that the blue dragonborn, like there's this almost like semi-transparent red curtain that this blue dragonborn holds open and gestures you in.
Oh.
Just what the blue dragonborn gestures? What? Sorry, things are still processing.
The blue dragonborn opens this curtain and gestures Nick forward into the private room.
She goes. Steps in. Okay.
Right. You see the black dragonborn looking at you, arms crossed, looking you up and down. Sell yourself.
No, well,
Did you say sell yourself? Next is all kinds of wisdom save.
You said you came here
19.
for a job. She's waiting for you to
Not
tell her what
nat
you
19.
did.
Okay. She's okay.
$5.
Think. She goes to a happy place, which is all her books and all her alchemy salves. And I was like, okay. She goes, hi, my name is Salaza, and I am a woman of many talents, and I can satisfy any customer. They say and she's like, I'm good with my hands. I like to tinker. She she winks. She doesn't know if winking is gonna help sell herself, but she does. She tries to appear as flirty and sultry as possible.
All right,
She might end up winking a bit too much, like if they don't
I am
respond.
going to give you. I want
Performance.
a performance check. Yes.
Why did I add that? I'm awful at
Can I just
performance.
say, can he get advantage for that amazing performance?
I think you guys have
Being good with
I
his
got
hands as an
I got a
artificer is quite fun.
you have +5 to any charisma skill checks in this town. Remember?
Oh,
right.
that's good.
Cool. Could she use a reroll for that? That's terrible. No, it was a +5, right?
Yeah.
Give me something good. Oh my god. That's okay. I have to live with that one. 14. Can she guide? Oh, she can't. She can't guide herself. It's concentration. Never mind. 14.
You have inspiration?
Do I have inspiration? I don't know. I don't. No, I don't.
Right. Play your reroll and.
Okay.
I would give you my inspiration, but I'm really enjoying this.
I used her good rolls for the wisdom save.
So she looks you up and down.
She's winking too much. She's got like a twitch.
She rolled a nat 1 insight.
Oh! She thinks it's just a
Wow.
condition.
Yeah, she goes. Well, we can put those skills to the test. When can you start?
She goes, looks around. Wisdom saves, like shit. Okay, that's not too bad. 15. Okay. She goes, when can I start? She tries to be like all confident, like does a little sway.
Careful.
She looks you up and down. We have an initiation process. Why don't you go around and see what the girls here are meant to do?
Like shit. In her mind, like she composure. She's like, okay, sure. And she goes, where should I start? She like looks around. Like which room should she like? Which girl should she go to first? Should I just show myself around or?
I want to see which one you approach.
Oh. Testing.
Nat 20! Where was that when I needed? Oh,
Ow.
never mind. It's fine. She's like, she goes, I'm right on it. She goes, hop right on it. She goes, she almost feels like a bit of bile when she turns away. It's like,
As you turn away to start walking back in, you feel a voice in your head.
Huh?
please, she's like, please, Johan, not now.
What?
She's like, please, Johan, not now.
No, I'm
Not
just,
right, please, no. Not right now.
I'm just checking something.
That was brilliant.
That's funny. That's funny. That's funny. I like that. I appreciate that. I think I'm right, and they can speak in your head. Give me a second. Let me double check.
You think you're right?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't believe it.
Oh no, it's nothing. It's not a voice in your head. Actually, I need I need you to tell me what are the thoughts going through Nix's head.
You mofo.
uh
So right now, her thoughts are, she's like, come on, be cool, be cool. She's like, gotta get the lay of the land. Be cool, be cool. That's all because that's what she's trying to keep. She's trying to keep her focus right now. Because if she stops focusing on that, she's gonna like freak out and run out of out of the problem.
All right. Okay. All right. So,
You got this.
all right. You make your way. Before we know who you approach, Cinder, you are. Cinder's like, "Go ahead."
Ready.
And he's like, let's go.
You are approaching the tavern the way that
You shouldn't.
they said, and you see Nexus pacing outside.
What's going on, Nixus? Nexus?
Lorcan and Nix went in. Nix is pretending she wants a job here.
Oh, really? Okay. I'll be right back. And I'll go in. Is there anybody?
You knock on the door. You have to knock
Okay.
on the door.
All right. I will knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock.
And again, the latch on the door opens. This male dragonborn pops his head. What? Do you have an invitation?
I would like a massage, please, from a very short female. And I'll turn and I'll wink at Nexus. And I'll
Oh
say,
no.
I would like her to massage my furry bulge.
Oh. Ooh. Oh.
Let me guess, they don't bite an eyelash, they get all kinds of weirdos in there. It's fine.
He looks at you. Oh, are you in the private clients of the new girl?
Oh, yes, that would be great.
1 second. He closes the latch.
What's Nexus say to me when the door shuts?
He looks. Nix is disguised. I mean, he did see her when she was little, but like, Cinder, you're gonna get us in trouble. Wait, could I pretend to be one of hers as well?
No, you can't. Trust me, I got this. I got money.
Next
What
is
money?
Isn't Nick's keeping all the money though at the moment?
Yeah, what money? Unless he's got his own savings.
We'll cut back to Larkin in a second. Nix, as you were going to start to make your way, you see the guy that saw you come in your direction and go, new girl.
She's like walking along, like she doesn't register him, going, you go. She goes, huh? Who? Me? And she looks up.
Yeah. He looks between you and the boss to see if the boss approves. And he speaks both to you, but like he seems to be speaking to you, but he's looking at the boss past you, and goes,
Dun, dun, dun.
"We have apparently a regular client of hers."
She goes, I sorry, I've just started here. What do you mean regular client? She's trying to get out of it. It's like, what are you talking about? She's starting to sweat. Dragonborn can sweat.
You see that the boss again. What are your thoughts right now?
she's like, what? What do you mean regular? She's like, what's happening? She's like on the verge of panic. And then she takes
Wisdom
a breather.
save. Wisdom
Fine.
save.
Wisdom save. She's like, okay. Not one.
Oh.
She's like, what's happening in her mind?
Okay. So you see the boss is like, send them in.
Oh.
And she looks at you, Nix.
Is Cinder disguised?
No.
Oh, good.
That's why I made a fearbolt joke.
Yeah.
That's very bold.
You see the boss looks you in the eyes, Nix, and goes, first room on the right is empty.
She goes, great.
Hey, Nexus.
He winks and she's stuck winking like that twitching.
I
You
just
see the
realized
guy nods to the boss, and the boss has this air of like he's interested to see what's about to happen. And the guy comes back, opens the door. Cinder, this
Oh.
way, sir.
Oh, what?
This
This way,
sir.
sir.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Nexus, give me some coins.
Needs
I
have
just-
the money.
I thought I did, but I got 5 gold.
Niggs has the money. I don't have money.
Oh, okay. Then she could pay me to pay her. Okay, great.
That doesn't make any sense.
I'll go in now.
Yeah. You see the guys looking at you up and down.
I'm
He-
a little
he
defeated.
realizes-
It's okay.
Like you broke.
Yeah, he realizes the mess you can make, and he goes, first room on the right.
No.
For me?
Yes,
So over here?
this one. Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Can
Hi. Oh,
can Nix
you're pretty.
Nix is like done twitching, but she that's a goblin seat turns to see who it is. And she goes, just glances at Cinder, but
Cinder.
smiles. He goes, "Welcome, sir." He like, "I'll be right with you." He like nods to the room.
Yes, do bring lots of oils.
Right, the oil. She's like, she turns to the nearest attendant. He goes, "Where are the oils? In the back room. I'll go get it." She
Cinder will disrobe and get in the tub.
Oh.
All right. As all of this
Wow.
was happening, when Darpole entered the room, you see she stayed against the door. And she goes, what do you want?
We need to know who tried to kill Lorcan's mother, Nexus's mother.
Who?
What's her name again? It was
Accra.
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 We heard rumor that one of the brothels was owned by the person who was the culprit.
No, that's just rumors. He is a regular here, though.
Is he?
Yes.
Do you have any knowledge on
You can give me an insight check.
it? I can try. I guess you know what that's like. The dice is so unhappy it jumped out of my dice tray. Yeah, I got a 3, so I got a 4 again.
Alright.
I'm gonna use a reroll.
Alright, use it.
Yeah, it really doesn't like a fault.
I think you guys actually have a +2 to insight checks at the moment. Anyway.
We have a plus. Oh, perfect.
From another
nice.
card, yes.
Well, then there is the reroll card. I got a 15, so +2, 17 overall then.
17. Something she's not telling you. She goes, we know who he is.
Who is he?
He's not someone you want to deal with.
Well, that doesn't explain very well.
Look. Whoever's paying him wants Accra gone. And they're paying him good.
We need to know just so that we can try and protect him.
All I know is where he's staying.
We don't want to know where he's staying. We just want to know who's doing it.
Who's doing what?
We're trying to kill Accra.
Oh, who's paying him? I don't know.
No, both of them, really, if you want to know that. We just want to know so we can prepare if we have to.
He starts describing to you what he looks like. He usually comes over in the evenings. Every day.
That's not describing him very well.
No, but after she describes
Oh, so who is he?
what
What's he look like?
you want me to describe.
Well, I'm not gonna know.
He's like, I don't know.
He's got two horns, two white horns, and quite a long spine down the middle. He doesn't look like a regular dragonborn. He's both red and brass at the same time. It's weird.
Red
He's
and
got, yeah, his front is brass, but he's like the back of his arms and his back are red. He's got bandages. He always wears these bandages he never takes off on his arms.
And he's the one that's trying to
bright orange eyes.
get rid of Afro.
He's the one who put her in the hospital.
Right.
Now, who's paying him? I don't know.
Not at all.
Things have been changing around here.
Right. What else was it that we were trying to figure out as well? It was something
If
to do
the
with the
demons.
demons. And any news on the demons? Because
She looks at you. Don't tell me you believe the rumors that we are now ruled by demons.
there's rumors that we're ruled by demons.
This brothel, yes.
There's rumors that this brothel's ruled by demons.
Yes, you've been told this.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
I'm playing down.
I am done. Okay, not bad.
He's like, ow!
Okay. She goes, you haven't heard them.
No, what are they? I mean,
Some stupid people that wanted to get in and didn't have the connections to, started spreading rumors that were now ran over by demons. There were a few girls that died in an attack one of the nights, but it couldn't have been it. I wasn't here, but there's no way.
yeah, but who? Any idea of where it started?
Where what started?
Well, the attack, the girls.
I don't know. Anyone that was working that day is gone.
Anyone, everyone.
Yeah. Look, only me. Only me and the boss are still here.
What day was that?
Well, that was about 2 weeks ago.
Was the boss here when it attacked? When it happened?
She was in her office upstairs.
I'm guessing you were.
I was. It was my day off. But there's no way this place would be rubber.
Well.
That's just rumors.
Well, it's very curious that everyone went missing, though.
Missing? They were all dead.
Well, yes, dead. Has there been a thorough investigation?
Oh yes, because the guards are going to investigate the brothel most of them used to come to. Oh, of course not. That's been kept under wraps.
Well, it needs to be checked.
Are you worried about me?
I'm worried about everyone. Christ.
So you do believe the demon rumors?
Well, everyone was killed.
Yeah.
I didn't say by demons, but everyone was killed. There's something going on. Who wants to kill a brothel? Christ.
We have many high-end customers. If somebody threatened to reveal their identities, like I just did to you, yes, people could come for my throat.
Wait, you didn't threaten an identity because you've still not told me the bloody person's name.
I told him what he looks like.
Well, there's lots of dragonborns.
Lorcan, what do you want?
I just need to
Lorcan.
try and figure out what was going on. And if there is something going on, because obviously everyone did die that day.
Yes.
Was it 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
In Gainter, what happened 2 weeks ago? Do we know of anything?
Yes.
I can't remember 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, you have been dealing with the hideout. The Drow hideout.
Oh wow, that's only 2 weeks. Okay, nice.
You guys were about 2 weeks in Suyona. That was in your second week when you cleared out when you went back to rummage through their stuff to clear out like the loot and stuff. And then you had the end of that week, and then there's been another week to get to Suyana, to get to Carolina.
Oh.
So yeah, you were clearing out the hideout at that point.
Wow. Yeah. Do you think your what's the lady called of the house? Lady of the house?
The madam?
The madam would mind me trying to investigate why everyone died?
Are you back on duty?
Shortly, but I'm more freelance at the moment.
I mean, I can get you to speak with the boss, but we're gonna have to stay here a bit longer.
Oh, I see.
You don't want to get me into trouble.
No, I understand
Alright.
that. On that note.
Yeah, on that note, we're going back to Cinder and Nix. Nix, where did you go to get the oils?
She went to get the oils. Well, as she's going to okay. So she goes, can she like keep an eye out for anywhere she can duck in, or if anyone's acting a little, yeah, first a little nook where she might be able to duck in, be good. Or is it like too crowded to do that?
Give me let's say perception.
Just looking. Yeah. Perception roll or my passive perception?
Perception roll.
Yeah. Nice. I have advantage on it, but might not need it. That is 22, I think. Let me roll again.
I don't think you need it.
Ooh, even better. 24.
Jesus.
24. Alright. So there's a door that is open into it's like a slit open clearly to a dark room. You also have
Sorry, which one?
so you have this door,
That one, yeah.
and you have this corner here that seems to be slightly hidden because these chairs, these chairs are actually empty.
Okay.
This door has
Alright.
a slit open and it's to a dark room.
Okay.
I see.
Sorry, was that room? Sorry, I was zoomed in. Any other places?
This corner here, there's a door here.
All right, to duck into. Right.
Heavy
Gotcha.
door, but there's a corner here that seems to be out of most of the attention of people.
Okay. So before she takes a quick look, she goes, "Oh, once I need to check something with the customer." She's going to walk in to see Cinder.
As you walk in, I need you to do me a wisdom save.
Great. I love my life.
Please tell me you got lamp oil
Is
so you can
this-
set him on fire.
Is this the question I'm gonna ask? Is this magic or a magical ability?
No.
Cinder has a banana from the fruit bowl that's half peeled and looks at her and smiles.
Great. I don't want to think about that. 21.
21?
Yeah.
So you come in and you manage to steal yourself, but Cinder is naked in the bath eating a banana,
No.
looking at you.
She sees right through him. She'll get close. She'll smile. Is the bouncer or is an attendant behind us? So I need to get close to him to talk.
Close the door. Yeah.
Oh, close the door. Okay, so it's like private time. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, and there is
She'll go
stuff
up to
floating to the top.
Oh.
Well,
She
I
goes-
am rotting.
Ugh,
He is dying.
that's just not nice.
She goes, Cinder. She goes,
Oh, yes.
I need a distraction while I look around the place. Can you do that? And she's looking past him. She's not
Oh.
gonna look at what is happening.
Sure.
Do what you
after,
do best.
I'm
No,
supposed
now.
to get a massage.
You will get one from someone else, but right now, mission first.
No. That's not what I paid for.
You know,
She goes, Cinder, you didn't pay for anything. I have the money.
Promise me you'll feed me grapes later.
She thinks that's a small price to pay for his corporation right now. Fine, grapes.
In front of
Do your thing.
Nexus.
Just do it. She's getting exasperated.
Okay, fine.
you
And
should
he'll-
have specified what kind of distraction you wanted because
Too late.
He will just walk outside that door.
That's
Right.
exactly what
And then
I was
she's gonna-
about to do.
Then she's gonna scurry out and go, oh, he needs a few things. I'll be right back. She's gonna run towards this door.
I climb out of the tub,
As-
dry
as
my
soon
feet
as
so
you-
I don't slip.
Right. As soon as you open that door, you realize it is just a bathroom.
Just the bathroom. Oh, I need to get prepped as well. She goes into the bathroom, closes the door. She'll wait for the distraction to start, then sneak out.
I'll come out. Let me get
Oh,
my
no.
token. Still butt naked, holding
Oh,
my
no,
clothes,
there you go.
and I'll walk out here and I'll say, "Okay, who's next?"
Oh.
And then I'll walk over here, and I will jump over the back of the couch and slide down to sit naked next to the Dragonborn chick. Hi,
Oh.
babe. How you doing?
Oh.
You like bananas?
Do I hear this from where I am? Can I
You
do a
hear-
perception
you
roll?
hear-
or-
You hear something, right?
Yeah.
I
give me a
lean
percep-
back, put my arms on the back of the sofa, and spread my legs wide. So, been here long?
1 second.
That's a 19 for a 20.
You definitely hear Cinder's voice.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Charisma save.
Oh no!
Purple. We might be in trouble.
Her name is not Crepple.
No, I
it's
didn't say
Kiarple.
Kiarple. I didn't say Crapple, did I?
Purple.
Is her nickname for my little
Grapple.
crapple.
Crapple.
I need
that's
a
so
crap-
bad.
What?
Why did you give him a difficult Dragon Ball name? Just K. Crappy.
Hey, Kay.
Kiarple.
Kiarple.
Kia. Call it Kia. It's short, like Kia.
Oh.
Right.
K-I-A.
Peter, whilst you say that to Kiarple, the Dragonborn that was dancing that you sat next to looks at you,
Oh no.
and you hear in your mind, "You are going to take your hands off me for now. I need you to do me a wisdom saving throw."
You'll die.
Come on!
I need to, or she needs to?
You need to.
You need to.
Okay, but as I'm doing this saving throw, I will lean forward and pick up the bottle of alcohol and pour it down my chest and say, "Won't you lick it off for me?"
Okay, do you listen?
Do your wisdom save.
I don't know this one.
Oh my goodness. This ain't gonna be good. 12.
No.
All right. So, I will send
Uh-oh.
you a message of what happens.
Oh no.
Goodbye,
Oh wait, did
Cinder.
you fail? What did you get?
Cinder,
Yes.
do you have any advantage on your wisdom saves for any conditions?
12. Ooh.
No,
Okay.
not that I
He's not
see.
me.
You don't have any immunities either.
I do have a
Don't
staff
think
of
so.
healing in this campaign.
Alright.
That's not gonna help us out right
It's not
now.
gonna help you right now.
Oh no.
Alright.
Oh boy.
So, I'm gonna message you.
Hey, don't look at me.
Wait, isn't that the other way around? Because I'm a pretty hot fearbulb.
Well, above table, we know
And-
who the succubus is.
And I have to
Thank you,
say,
Cinder.
I just want to point out that you said nothing about it being cold in here. So,
Does she
come
get
on,
repulsed
I
and
got
let him
big
go?
feet. What?
Oh, boy.
Okay, fine. I'll wait for you in the bathroom, my dear. I mean, in my tub, my dear. So, please. Whoa, what just happened? I accidentally hit a key and it put us on break for a second.
Oh, no, we're here. We're definitely still here.
I will
What?
say, I will
Damn.
wait in the bathroom, in the bath for you, my dear. Please hurry. I'll grab the comb off the shelf so that you can comb my chest hairs.
Alright.
What?
As as all this was happening, what was happening with Lorcan?
Lorcan was having to wait, obviously.
Yeah.
I heard some commotion, but we couldn't really do anything, could we?
You had about a 2-3 minute window to do something.
Well, I can head on out and see what's happening and act like a guard that I'm meant to be, I think.
Right? That's fine. You can do that.
I'll go over and start like, does he need removing from the premises?
He's fine, darling.
Okay.
Next, in that 2-3 minute window, what do you do?
Okay, so she would have kept like the door a little bit like ajar, just a little bit, just to see what's happening.
She
I
wanted
want to see Cinder in all his majesty. Yeah. And she like blinked. She would like blink, blink. Would he have drawn enough attention that she could have snuck out without them noticing?
That's what I mean. At the start, you have
Yeah.
like 2-3. During this happening, the
Yeah,
boss's
like a window,
eyes
right?
the boss's eyes were on him. Everybody was kind of looking like, "What is that?" or hiding their face from that. It was either paying attention to it or pretending not to see anything in that general direction. So you have about like a minute
Go
or
sneak.
two
Go
that you
sneak.
can
Okay.
sneak in. Someone.
So, okay, so she would have slipped out, and you said there was another room here. She's just looking for anywhere like that
This seems
might
a
be
heavy
off
door.
limits,
Heavy
like
door.
like kind of like staff or like
This
for
is
maybe the
a
madam's
heavy door.
office.
This is
This
a
one?
metal door. Yeah.
It's a metal door.
Okay.
She's like, don't mind me. Does it look like it can be picked, right? Does she not? She looks at it.
Sure.
Any signs of? Can she look? Yeah, can she investigate it for any signs of like additional protection aside from like a normal lock? Like,
You're doing this in a rush, so I'm
Is
gonna
it-
give you disadvantage.
so either one thing or two things, but one with disadvantage, right?
Huh?
Is that how?
Huh?
What is disadvantage? The investigation?
The investigation. 'Cause you're
Right,
trying to be
okay.
quick.
She's trying to be quick. She's trying to multitask as well. So nat 19 disadvantage. Damn, I forgot about that. Ooh, still good. 15 plus. Ooh, that is a 23 with disadvantage.
All right.
Good rolls.
You definitely realize that this is it's definitely an off limits area,
Is that a door?
and it doesn't seem to be trapped.
Nice. So so Cinder's like splayed out. This is
There's like, okay, so just to describe it to everyone, it's like some steps. There is this pole where people dance in front of this metal door.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
so it's like a back door, basically like a secret one. Like that's not really. That's
It's obvious that it's a door to like at least a backstage area,
yeah, yeah. All
A
right.
stage door.
basically.
I like it.
all right. So yeah. So while Cinder's showing the goods and getting charmed, she
He
doesn't know
called it
that.
good.
She's gonna try and lockpick the. She's gonna be like tools out real quick.
Again,
Kinda like
disadvantage.
getting-
You're trying to do it inconspicuously and quick.
Gross.
Oh, it's all right. You got reroll.
I do. It's not bad. Ooh. All right. That would be. Oh yeah, it's thieves' tools, right?
Yeah.
Wait. Did we say that's with? That's not with using my intelligence, is it? That's. Would it
You
be? 'Cause
can-
it's
yeah,
how she's
you
using
can.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. So that would be. Let's double check. So it's proficiency +3 plus her intelligence, right? Am I doing that right? Proficiency bonus with. Oh, hang on. I gotta check something for my right tool for the job. Tool proficiency is tool expertise. Ooh. So she has expertise. Ability to use it. Yeah. Expertise. So expertise is what? Double proficiency, correct?
Double proficiency.
Gotcha. 6 plus 5. Um. 16. 21.
Hey, wow.
Just beats.
Expertise.
Just beat.
It was a DC 20, yeah.
It's expertise, baby. That was a decent roll. That was an 11, and she still managed to get it.
You managed to sneak in. Actually, give me a stealth roll.
Oh no.
Oh, come on!
You managed to unlock the door, but you crashed through it.
No, I want to just check something. For
Ramon got so angry we lost him.
By the way, in this
just
town,
froze.
I know, yeah.
Oh.
Look, his face
Lost
blurred
it.
out.
He got so angry.
He got so angry, but I had good news for him.
Hey, he's back.
Oh, he's back.
It froze.
I thought he was a
Yeah.
doppelganger.
Would.
I was going to say, in this town you have disadvantage on stealth checks, but because of Cinder's distraction, it's a straight roll.
Hey.
Cool, I would have had disadvantage anyway. That is 16. 17, actually, +2. 16. 17.
Sure, you sneak, sure. And
Yeah, it was a good roll.
you
That'd be
sneak
horrible.
in. You are in
Hey.
the boss's office.
Oh.
Yeah, the boss's office. All right. She's gonna be like, all right, quick. She doesn't have a lot of time. She's gonna just do like a methodical search. Desk, any like shelves, any just like look through the file. Look, where are the files? Where is this info?
Chest.
And she's going
No.
to just yeah.
As you close the door and you think about this, you hear Cinder's voice saying, I'll wait for you in there then. Bring the comb, I'll take the comb. So you realize
Distraction over.
distraction's over.
This. She's like this is. She's not. She's like thinking, what happened? This doesn't sound like Cinder. Okay. All right. So she's gonna. She's in here. She's not backing out. She needs to be quick. All right. So she's still gonna go ahead with it.
Did anyone notice it going like us? Did we spot that, or
What?
her going in there, or not?
No.
Oh, damn it.
What's your passive perception there?
Not enough.
There you go.
11. No, not enough.
Not enough. That's all I need to know.
He's right. That was the disadvantage. It was like she stealthed decently, but so decently that even Loki didn't see.
I want you to give
Yes.
me investigation checks.
Okay.
As many as you can.
Okay.
And then jump
First
out the window
one.
and hide.
Jump out the window sounds good to me. So that was 15 for the first roll. How many rolls? Just one or a few.
Investigation. So what are you trying to? You said you wanted to look at the desk first, right?
Yeah, so it'd be like this, this, and this. Would it be one big roll, or would it be like little
So
rolls for each thing?
you will be several rolls for each
Okay.
thing. So 15. Was it 15? Did you say?
No, no. Yeah, 15. Yeah, 15. So I'll say.
15 for the desk. There seems to be papers and um, the ledgers, lists of clients, lists of the people that work here, money counts, everything in that, like everything that is expected. Nothing really jumps out at you, except maybe one thing.
Oh no.
Give me the goods.
All this, like, all the stuff that, like, the quills, the ink pots, all the stuff that he's used to write with is not, in the usual position. People usually have the paper that they're going to write in and the ink pot at the top where they dunk it. It seems to be further, like, closer, like either someone with smaller arms, or this is not set up for the boss that you saw.
Oh.
Okay, she notes that. Okay. So just to clarify, it doesn't look like a setup for the madam that she saw.
Yeah.
It's someone else's. Take this could be someone else's. Okay. So nothing apart from that. Interesting detail. Okay.
No, with the 15.
Oh.
I rolled low. The thing is, I used all my good rolls on getting in here.
Can I give him my inspiration now?
He's already okay, I've already given the result of the roll.
Yeah.
So not really.
Okay. She'll look around. She'll keep looking around.
Right.
The desk might be the most obvious place, so it might not be there. So she goes over
what
to.
else do you want to?
So she will look for. Is there any other? Okay, so apart from the desk, what other? Is there any shelves? Any other place where you could possibly chests? Or even can she look out to see if there's like a back panel? Because she doubts that they probably would leave it on the desk. So maybe like a little nook, maybe where they could have put away like a safe, where that could that sensitive info could be inside.
Hidden areas.
Right. Roll me another investigation.
Inspiration.
If you need.
Reroll.
Thank you. Come on. Oh my god.
You need a reroll.
Inspiration. I can use a reroll and inspiration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inspiration reroll. Yeah. Alright.
Are you saying my inspiration wasn't good enough?
Yeah. No, it was not too good. That is thank
Women
you.
are
I
so
appreciate it.
picky.
I appreciate it. So 23.
Oh, that's good.
All right.
That's better.
So as you look around, there's something that catches your eye that seems out of place in this room.
It's the dead body. Sorry.
On one of the walls, you notice there is a
Pin up
shield.
of cinder.
A shield. It looks like you. At first, you thought, oh, it's probably just like a ornamental, but one of those that represents a house. How'd you call them?
Sigil?
No, like the
Coat of arms.
The coat of arms, exactly. But as you look closer, it is clearly a heavy shield, an actual battle shield with a symbol on it. And the symbol is a tiger's profile.
Does that mean anything to her? Probably not. History check.
Do me. Sure. Let's do a couple of rolls here. Do me a history, and depending on that, I might or may not give you advantage on your arcana.
Okay.
Ooh. 14 plus. Oh, interesting. 22.
Jesus.
Sure.
Mother
So
Mary.
you start thinking there is no race that you know of that looks like tigers, like actual
There's
tigers.
Leonin, Tabax.
I mean, there's
yeah.
Leonin, there's Tabaxi, but they don't they look more humanoid than this. And there's shifters, sure, but shifters are, either animals that have been blessed by gods or humanoids that have been cursed by the other force. It doesn't make sense to have a shield with an emblem
Of a
like
tiger.
of a tiger. You don't know your stuff, the history of this world and of what you've studied, and you don't remember anything of this world that sounds like resembling that. But now you can do me an arcana check with advantage.
Hey. Raza might know what this is, but Nyx is like, huh?
Yeah, I'm also like, huh?
We'll get there.
Ooh, that was a 15 and a 16. I'll take the 16. So that would be a plus Arcana, same thing. So that's gonna be 24.
Jesus.
24.
Lincoln Nora.
As you're thinking and rummaging your mind through the history of this world, you're not finding anything, and then you remember you're here to look for anything related to demons and alarm bells in your head. But just as alarm bells ring in your head, we're gonna switch scenes.
You hear the door open, don't you?
No,
the door opens and they go, "Excuse me."
in your head, not really. It's an expression, right? I'm not saying that anybody knows you're here, but Nyx remembers that if this is anything to do with demons, you're in trouble.
One quick thing: could she have put in her rush? She might not have found anything. Like, she put some of those ledgers in her bag of holding to look over later.
Sure.
Like business ledgers. All right, cool. Scene. We're good.
Right, scene. Cinder, should I say?
I'm blowing bubbles.
As promised, came in and was like,
oh,
looked at you and said, "You're such an easy target."
Target.
He smiles. So
you're dead.
he does this, and you are charmed. So I need you to, as she goes in to kiss Cinder, I need you to make me a Constitution saving throw.
I like how she smiles sweetly as she's saying, "I'm going to kill you."
I choose to fail.
Are you sure?
Please, please, don't forget you're on half health.
Oh, that's true.
Trust me, you don't want to choose to fail this one. Above table.
Who else is just there munching on an apple now?
Well done.
That passes?
It does.
Yeah.
Just.
I'm really curious what would have happened.
You would have died. Sorry, spoilers.
Alright, okay, so I need to
You
roll.
lose a kidney.
I need to roll 5d10 plus 5.
What?
5d10.
So that is 39.
Inflict
half
wounds.
Damage
is 19. So take 19 points of damage.
You'd just be a smear. No,
It was inflict
You
wounds.
you would have.
It?
No.
19, you said?
19 points of psychic damage.
Okay.
By the way, your hit point maximum is reduced by 19 as well.
Oh, crap.
So your health has been.
And I need you to do me another wisdom
Yeah,
saving.
that snap of healing's coming in useful, isn't it?
Oh.
I need you to do me another wisdom
Nuh-uh.
Take a reroll.
with advantage.
It's advantage, right? Yeah, do it again.
Oh,
Then if you
okay.
fail that one, reroll. Take a reroll. If you fail this one. Come on. Big money. Big
No.
money! Come on.
18.
Alright. As she kisses you and you feel this excruciating pain, this life being drained from you, you break out of that charm and you see what's in front of you for what it is.
Can I do something?
You can. I
Wait.
just want to
What
show
do you
you
see?
what it is.
What you were seeing before you do anything.
Okay.
Show it to me.
I am working on it.
I'm so glad he chose not to fail that.
Yeah. So am I.
He would have just been KO'd. The kiss of death, basically. Oh my gosh.
Oh no, I clicked the wrong thing. One second.
You did. She's running away.
She's like this guy.
Ooh.
Saucy.
I'm not seeing anything.
Oh,
Oh, there we go.
Hmm.
Ooh.
Now you may do something.
A winged succubus, I'm guessing?
Oh, it is succubus, alright.
That's a demon, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
this thing's infested. Oh, that's a shame.
What do you want to do, Cinder?
I'm going to...
He's going to look it in the eye.
I'm going to climb out of the tub. But before I climb out, I'm going to get a mouthful of water. Filthy water, I know. And spit it all over her. And then I am going to... I've been saving this one.
Oh, no.
It's going to be loud.
Oh no!
Require a dexterity saving throw.
Alright.
What was that nat 1 for? A deck save, nice.
The deck save. That was the deck save for the water.
Oh, really?
No, the dex save was for Thunderbolt jump. I'm going to jump from one side of her to the other, but she's wet, so she's got disadvantage because water is a conductor.
Yeah, but the nat 1 was for her to
So what's
dodge
this
the
deck
water.
save,
So
then?
she's soaked in water.
That's
Now I'm
what
gonna
I
do
wanted.
the other one. She failed.
That's what.
She failed?
She failed.
Nice.
66 points of damage.
Oh, that kills her.
Where
That
did
is
you,
exactly.
where did you jump to?
That is her health exactly.
So I
Send the follower in.
went
Inspiration.
from here
Send.
to
I will
here.
award Cinder inspiration again. Yes.
How much
Cinder.
damage? 33?
Cinder.
33 times 2.
Cinder
This is
got-
where he left and where he lands.
Oh, really?
And her health
absolutely
was
right.
66 exactly.
Damn.
Full damage.
And-
But everybody hears this.
Yes,
Correct?
yes, and I'll rush over, grab the bowl of fruit and my clothes, and then I'll go out the door and say, "Oh, that was awesome! Thanks for everything, everybody. I gotta go," and I'm
Okay.
heading for
It
the
was
door.
like
Okay.
like
As
smoke
you
coming from
walk
the roof.
out,
We're all running over.
yes, as you walk out, several things are happening. Next, were you going to see what's behind that shield?
Yeah. So if this is before the, yeah, she was going to see behind the shield.
So as you were about to turn the shield, you hear the noise.
Oh, about? Oh.
So Nyx has a choice. She either gets to see what's behind the shield, or she goes outside to see what's happening.
She-
Curiosity or not?
She just thinks, oh, that's. Oh, she goes, oh, maybe Cinder's. Oh, okay, he might have overdone it this time. Maybe she's gonna take the opportunity to Look behind the shield.
It's definitely
Always
another
Cinder.
distraction.
Right.
Yeah.
So, as you look behind the shield, there is a hidden compartment.
Oh. Yeah.
Locked. This is where all the reroll points come in.
Yeah, look.
Alright.
Yeah, because you really need that on your with your double proficiency.
I can still roll terribly. Alright, so she's gonna try and lockpick it then. Oh boy.
I have a question. Does the succubus disappear? Is it dead as a succubus or is it dead as a human?
It is dead as a succubus.
Okay.
Okay.
I would
Just
hope
let's
that.
make sure that Cinder didn't just kill a random human. You know.
No, definitely a succubus.
I will
The
use
psychic damage he took, he knows it's a succubus.
Do you know what a succubus is?
No, but he knows it's definitely not a human.
okay. So I'm gonna use a reroll. I'm gonna put that away. Just in case it wasn't the best of rolls. So here you go.
What should
Yeah.
be
It wasn't.
Good.
It was a nat 18 for, well, it was proficiency was plus 6 plus 5.
That's
So 11, so 29.
9. Christ.
29 opens it. The DC was 25.
That does it? Was it a DC 28?
25.
25. I'm glad I rerolled that. It's a terrible roll. It went from a 9 to an
Not easy
18. I'll
stuff
take it.
you're doing, so. Okay,
Mm,
as you
fun.
tick, 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 open it, we're gonna cut to Cinder.
Suspense
I
is
need
building.
you to do me a sleight of hand to close the door without this lady seeing the body in the room.
Oh, the succubus.
Okay.
Lawton's
Nat
running over to see what's going on.
Right? She didn't see it. She didn't see it. But
Just
Lord,
casually
you're
goes-
on your way to Cinder. What do you do?
Just running over. Is everything alright?
He comes up to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a good time to leave now. Can I'm pulling on my shirt.
You're
Yeah.
not well, sir.
We better go.
Shall I help you out?
Where's that little gnome that promised me something? We gotta go. We really gotta go. Catch up to me. Bye.
Catch up to me.
Okay. I'll be like, what on earth has happened? So confusing.
Okay. I guess as Cinder is going to the door, the boss stands in front of the door.
I just want to make it clear that person I said that's got to go with me. I don't know that person at all. I'm a customer. Gotta go.
I'm a paying customer.
What are your thoughts at this moment?
Who's?
Gotta go.
Wait, actually, before you tell me, let me see if I can do that again. So that I'm not being unfair. No, it's at will. So, Peter,
Yes, what are your thoughts?
surface thoughts right now?
My
Gotta go.
surface thoughts are
Gotta go fast.
gotta go.
Gotta go fast?
So glad I remembered the fruit. There's great
All
Yeah,
right.
that's what he's thinking.
I need you to do me a wisdom save.
Oh,
Oh no.
Who, me?
Yeah, she's gonna probe further.
Oh man, I am so
Take
dead.
a reroll if you need it.
I am gonna die.
This is why Nyx is
Yeah.
stockpiling them.
Does
Nope, that passes.
that
it?
passes.
Oh!
So she can't. You feel her intense eyes trying to probe deeper into your mind, and you resist it. And she goes, "Of course, sir."
Nice place. Have a good night.
She extends her hand.
Oh, oh, I take out my 5 gold.
She goes, ah, so kind. And sees you walk through the door.
Well,
Okay, let me change my balance to 0.
Oh no.
As you going out the door, you see that the boss is still eyeing you curiously, and then shifts her gaze to Lorcan. Meanwhile, scene back to Nyx. Nyx, you open this secret compartment, and all there is in there are 3 things. 1, you see the most unusual sword. Razor sharp. A long sword, razor sharp. However, the sharp end and the handle are on the wrong side of each other.
huh? Hold on, you'll have to explain that to me. What?
So when
The
you
pointy side's into the handle.
no, so when you handle a sword that has like a guard, a
Yeah.
hand guard, the hand guard is like
Mm.
here, and the sword and the sharp end is here.
Yeah.
Mm.
The handle is on this side. The it's on this side.
It's reversed.
Is
basically.
reversed.
So the guard's behind
The hand.
the hand.
So the guard and the sharp end of the sword usually are on the same side. They're now on the opposite side.
I don't understand why that would be like that.
I think
Yeah.
the player
It's
knows.
yeah, I know. Nick's very confused because it seems so that whoever this was made for has a weird grip. Like they don't have like the usual grip, like with like a thumb or something. She looks at it weird. She goes, she hasn't seen that. She hasn't nowhere in her mind does that register. Like what species could
When
have
with
such a
your
weird grip?
arcana, you have heard. I give it to you that with your 24 arcana, when you looked at the shield face, you realize that there is a type of demon that you've heard about,
A fiend, yeah.
a
Yay!
fiend
The
that
tiger, the grip,
the tiger,
the grip.
the
She's
grip.
like
She's
her
adding
eyes
things.
widen. Yeah, her eyes
There is
widen.
also a letter,
Hmm.
and there is um, there's a letter, and there is a scroll.
Okay. Just a normal scroll, spell scroll,
It's a spell scroll.
spell scroll. Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. All right. So that was the easy part. Now I need to get out.
Invisibility, something.
Give me a perception roll. Actually, no.
Okay.
Before we continue, let's go on our break.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
Can I do the roll now or when we come back?
We can roll when you come back.
Oh no. Yeah, I don't like that. She stood right near.
So when we come back, we're gonna see what's happening.
Good luck.
During the break,
Godspeed.
Cinder will put his pants on.
Okay.
Takes him that long.
Welcome back,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome to the Velvet Touch Brothel, and let's see how this is going to go.
Yay!
Our Cinder is at the door after the boss takes the money. She starts making her way to where Cinder was, and Lorcan She looks you up and down. What are you thinking at the moment?
Thinking. I was thinking. Oh God, what was it actually?
Cinder told him he gotta go.
Yeah, I was thinking, why on earth has he ran off? This lad. I'm also in guard mode. I need
He's
to talk to the
confused.
boss.
Hmm.
She stops.
How has there not been an investigation about this?
She stops and looks at you. I hope you had a good time, sir.
I have. Thank you. It was very nice to catch up with an old acquaintance, if you know.
She's holding out her hand. I don't care. Give me money.
I don't actually know what I've got.
Uh-oh.
Don't say that. Where do I see it?
Inventory.
Thank you.
Inventory, yeah.
Oh yeah, I've got 9 gold, so that's fine. How much is it? For,
We are so poor
you say?
considering we own a tavern.
Nick has all the money. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Nick's
How
has
much
got
is
all
it
the
usually
cash.
for the sessions?
Usually you, depending how long you stay, it's usually 1 gold per hour.
Oh.
That's why Cinder giving 5 gold. She was like, "Oh yes, of course, sir."
I overpaid?
By a lot.
I will give 2.
And they didn't say anything. They're like, okay, you're just tipping us. Great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I'll give 2 to be in like her favor.
That includes cleanup then.
Yeah.
That's true.
He takes the gold and says, "I am glad we have." Then she pops her head to Yarple. "We have our girls please you, sir. Now, if you'll excuse me."
Okay, and I will start to head out.
Okay.
Might want to walk quickly.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, you get to about here.
I'm gonna stand directly here to try and block the view of like as I'm going out.
Okay. You get to about there before she opens the door
Which door?
where Cinder just came from.
Oh.
Nix, meanwhile, what do you take?
she'll
I asked
take
for a
the.
roll, didn't I?
You did perception, but
Perception, yes. Give me perception.
Grab the coins off the desk for me.
Jump out the window.
if there is a window, so there's a net advantage. That was.
Don't forget, you're not paying in gold, you're paying in gems. Just remember that.
You're paying in
Oh,
gems,
sorry.
yeah.
Gems.
She took
It's
mine.
the equivalent. It's the equivalent of
Oh.
5 gold and 2 gold, but it's in gems.
26. Net 90.
Okay. You heard Cinder's conversation with the boss.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And
So he's
you
leaving.
know
She knows that he's
you
out.
know something has happened. You heard him say,
I gotta go.
I gotta go.
And there was a
you
thunderbolt.
You heard the
Hmm.
door and you heard the noise. And you
Okay.
hear do you grab stuff from the
Yeah, so as that is happening, she'll grab the scroll, she'll grab the letters you said,
letter?
and
It's a thick one, but it's 1 letter.
the ledger. Yeah, she'll grab that. In that time, could she just grab like all of it? Like was it like a rapier, right? The rapier, the ledger,
It's a long sword.
a longsword. Yeah, she'll
You
just
really want to take
bag
that?
of holding.
Yeah.
Just put it in.
You have time to put all that in the bag of holding, and as you close the compartment, you hear Larkin speak to the boss because the place has gone quiet.
Hmm.
Quiet.
Okay.
Yeah. Quiet enough for you to hear their conversation. And you hear Larkin making their way.
Okay.
Close to you.
So she knows her time as the window's like slipping. Is there any like from like what she's investigated before? Is there any other way out of this place? Is it like a back door that
There's
like a private door?
window here, but that seems
Window?
to have been boarded.
It's boarded up.
Yeah.
Okay. Does it look like just from a quick glance? Does it look like something she could like work on and like with her tools, kind of like loosen it and like try and slip out the window?
What?
Just
Do
from
you
a quick
have
glance.
crowbar?
Crowbar? I think she does actually.
It's a good question.
Let's look at Nix's things.
Does she have teleportation? That would also help.
Yeah, it's a lot of things she would love to have.
She can hide in the
She
chest.
does have a she does have a crowbar. Wait, there's a chest?
I didn't say
That's
anything.
fine. There's no chest.
Okay, so you know that if you get your crowbar, you can take one of the planks out and makes it small enough to squeeze through. But you know this it's like
Yeah, be careful.
you're gonna have to you're gonna have to hurry.
Yeah. She goes, and she knows that she's unlikely to be able to get it. Like if they're already leaving, you know, so she's gonna go to the planks and like quick thinking, pull out, like think of the crowbar, pull it out of the bag of holding, and start to like leverage it, kind of trying to find like she's gonna be smart about it. Instead of brute force, she's gonna be trying to find some leverage, like kind of like the right place to like
Angle.
loosen it without minimal effort, basically, not strength, but like
And quietly.
brain power, and quietly.
Give me an investigation then. Straight roll.
Reroll. These are all my reroll points are going, people. Honestly. And this is why I do the recaps, because I'm gonna.
By the way, you have to play 2 more because like you have to play 2 this time. You didn't.
Did it not work?
No.
It's not working. Can you do it? Because I keep trying and it doesn't work. I keep dragging them.
1 second.
Okay.
What is going on with my Roll20 just glitched? Give me a second. We have technical issue, and I'm about to say not again. So don't ruin my game again, Roll20.
Actually, I can do that. I needed this guys anymore.
Okay. So accept what I'm requesting.
What are you requesting?
To seal it.
There you go. You're good.
Okay. And seeing as this is a do or die, she doesn't need the disguise anymore. And so she's going to look at her signet of Dellen, like a ring, her signet ring. Because I need some extra, a little extra juice in the tank. So with that, she's able to get a second spell slot back. And with that second spell slot, she's going to cast Enhance Ability to really ramp up those neurons.
No,
so she'll get advantage on the roll.
You need we're okay. You're in a time crunch here. The investigation is whether you're gonna get advantage on your either acrobatics or athletics check.
Right. Okay. Fair. All right.
Let me clarify what it is for.
Okay. So yeah, it was. She's just trying to make sure because the second roll was not good. So she was just
How much was your roll?
It was terrible. It was like a 10.
Would Nexus have
So
heard?
that just means you have a straight roll of athletics or acrobatics, your choice.
Would Nexus have heard her trying to break the wood from outside?
Okay. Cool. So then she will.
He doesn't know what's happening inside.
Yeah, no. With that, she's like, she's in a hurry. That's why she's not really thinking, like, not as sharp as she is usually. So with that, she's gonna. Is that enough to loosen the plank and like?
How much? I didn't hear.
Well, I got a 10. You've won an acrobatics or athletics.
And now that means you have a straight roll of athletics or acrobatics. That's what I said.
Okay. So that's what I was trying to ask. She was asking that. So I was asking if I already had pulled the plank and she just had to figure out how to slip through.
No, that's for you to pull the plank. Is acrobatics or athletics?
Okay. So with that, that's what she's going to use Enhance Ability for. She's going to use it on her acrobatics.
Okay.
On her dex checks. Dexterity.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means that whilst you're casting the spell, she's going to open the door. Because you're taking, I'm doing it, you're not in turn order, but I'm doing it almost turn-based. And you're going to cast a spell, that's going to take time.
Takes a moment. Yeah, 6 seconds. It takes 6 seconds to cast a spell.
That's
Yeah,
Which
plenty
is
of
fine.
quicker
time.
than it, because you have to stop what you're doing, cast the spell, and continue what you're doing. So
Mm.
that's gonna take longer. That's just I want you to
18
be aware of that.
seconds.
Okay, let's go.
And to be
Is that
fair-
what you want to do? Are you sure?
Well, like, oh, I see what you mean. Like, it
Because
would be
if you
quicker to
roll
jump out.
now and you can open it, you're gonna be going out at the same time as she opens the door.
See the body.
And if you
Right.
stop to make a spell,
It'll be
she
okay.
opens the door
No,
as
I
you
get.
finish
No,
the
she
spell.
understands that. She's like, she's just gonna risk it. So just a straight roll. She's just gonna jump out. Because I assume she hears them approaching as well,
Correct.
right? The door. Good, because she's got a good
She's
passive
approaching
perception.
the body door.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right. That was really not good. I thought it was
Have a
great. It
reroll.
wasn't. I could re-roll it. Maybe allow me to re-roll as a separate roll, right?
Yes, it's a roll.
Which way does
Because it's
the
like-
door open? Inward or outward?
This one inward.
Okay. That would have been 15 because she's
That's
disadvantaged
enough
on
to-
acrobatics.
Open the plank. And as you open the plank, Nexus looks, it says, Nix? And this door opens. Larkin, you're at this door.
Yeah, Lorcan is going through this door and out of the building.
Right. Cinder is already outside
Okay.
at this point.
Cinder's legging it. What are you talking about?
Nexus is confused. She opens the door. She sees the body. And she goes, "Don't let them leave!" And it's a voice echoes in the brothel.
Cinder jumps off the edge of the world.
I want everybody to roll initiative, but it's more for us to keep track
So what's
of
happening?
you escaping time.
Wait, there's a person at the desk. Remember, isn't there?
He came in when the commotion was going
Oh,
on.
the boot. Okay.
Yeah. So I want everybody to roll the initiative, but it's to see if you escape in time. Cinder's already out, but you still need to get out. Like if someone steps out the door, you need to be out of sight. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Dirty 20.
19.
18.
18,
Okay.
19,
I'll roll it
20. Now, Nexus
You
will
guys are
roll like
doing
that,
the
too.
shit.
That rolls awful.
Oh, she didn't roll well.
Oh well, sucks to suck.
God damn it! Rolled it twice. Sorry.
Alright? Just edit it.
I'm trying to get it on the board. There we go.
Oh, they added a sort button for players.
A what? Oh yeah. That's nice.
Okay. Is everyone there? No. Nix is missing.
No. 18.
You can edit your turn number so that I will initiative for Next is good. Nat 20. Incredible. Ooh.
We all rolled well on that one.
Yeah, you are
We needed it.
leaving this place.
Yeah.
We leave.
Okay, there's one more person that needs a roll.
They're legging it.
Alright, let's get this sorted.
Well, I didn't actually know that we were legging it until I've just heard that.
Right, everybody ready then?
Oh, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
chasing
I was
Cinder like, what
afraid.
did
I
you
was
do?
petrified.
The first person to react to the boss's call is the lady that was singing.
Singing where?
This
There's
one.
3 of
Back
them.
here on the
Oh no, it's
that
the
one.
Singer. All right.
Yeah, that one.
She likes me.
Did you close this door when you left?
Well, it's a door. I would hope so. They don't just leave it open, do they?
No, but I don't know if you left.
I didn't mention it. I would have shut it behind me.
In that case, she goes all the way to the door, opens it.
And I punched the person in the face. Sorry.
Yeah.
What?
You're hitting a
Yes,
lady? Wait, I killed a lady. Never
I need
mind.
a wisdom saving throw.
Wisdom saves? Really? Wisdom saves?
Go like it.
No. I got an 11.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to re-roll. Because I know an 11 is not good enough for anything. Here, take a card.
Pay me. Bribe me.
I got an 18.
Nice. You feel this dragonborn's charm reach into you.
Down, Bessie.
And you catch a glimpse of Kjarpol. And you steel yourself. And you resist the charm.
It's disgraceful.
Alright. That's the turn.
And he
I have
punches
a
her.
question.
Yes?
This is turning into kind of like combat, right? Like
No, so
with
she
escape
just
attempt.
used the charm, basically.
Oh, I
Okay.
class that as combat.
It's just a question because I don't know if the karma cards that are for combat will kick in or not. That's all.
Oh, which one's that?
Which one is that? So
It would be Footloose.
Footloose.
Each party member must roll a 1d20 during the next combat. The bottom half players lose their movement on their first turn,
Oh, God.
and then the top half each gain that combined movement. Is the positive?
You know, Roz.
I dislike
Alright.
you guys rolled for that already, didn't you?
I don't
He rolled for
remember
it, yeah.
what Oh,
Someone-
yeah. I
someone
got
got the
double
boost.
movement out of that.
Yes, I believe it was Cinder and Nyx that got the movement, and Lorcan and Nexus that lost the movement.
No,
Remember
Lorcan got movement.
that? Lorcan got movement?
Nick's lost it. Lorcan got up.
But
I
I've
believe.
not used it because I didn't remember.
Nix is going out
Okay,
a window.
I don't
anyways.
remember, so I don't care. Everybody reroll.
Okay.
Oh.
Just a 1d20?
Is
Sorry
it
to
a
complicate
dexterity
things.
check
It's
or
applicable.
save?
What
I
are
like
we
that.
rolling?
Just a d20? Straight up d20?
Oh, my God.
I rolled a 19.
It's a d20. Just a straight d20.
I got an 8 this time.
I'll roll for Nexus. Right.
Oh, twinsies.
Nyx and Nexus have the movement. Lorcan and Cinder don't.
What? How much movement do we lose?
Oh.
All movement.
And I think we also got new orthotics as well, unless that's already kicked in before.
No, I
Which
believe
is-
it is.
How long do I lose?
A random
all
party member
movement
just got new
for?
boots. I don't know who it was.
It's you. That is yours.
Yeah,
Can you?
That's mine?
Can you
Hmm.
play?
that's right.
Can you play your karma card, your Footloose karma card, so you can
Question.
delete it?
How long do I lose all movement for?
One turn.
So I'm buggered. Thank you.
Where did it go?
I've deleted it. It's fine.
Oh, you deleted it. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. So that's a good point. Nyx, you have extra movement. That you have.
Minus 10 because of new
Minus 10.
orthotics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Nexus runs up and extends his hand to help you. Basically, help action to help you climb out of there.
Hey. It's like, she's like, look, and she sees, she's like, oh, she goes, thank Dylan. And she like jumps in, she literally just leaps into his arms. Where's everyone else?
On your turn.
That's
Lorcan,
all she says.
Yeah.
you saw this dragonborn that almost overposed with something else that flew towards you.
Flew.
Flew.
This thing flew.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is the door open?
Which one?
In front of me.
Yes.
Well, I can't move. I will shut the door and hold it.
Okay.
I opened it. I'm just pulling it back.
I'm
All
closing
right.
it.
I want a contest of strength.
Okay. What
Lorcan, go big.
strength am I
Go
using?
big,
You can
Lorcan.
use-
Straight strength?
You can
or
use athletics or acrobatics or.
acrobatics.
Athletics, probably.
I can just do acrobatics works.
Yeah, because it might be the way he's holding the door. It doesn't necessarily have to be just strength.
Mm.
No, strength I can use if you want.
You want to use strength?
Yeah,
Then do
strength's better.
athletics then.
16.
Okay. Let me see what they roll.
Probably better than a 16.
You don't do that.
Depends on how strengthy they are.
Oh, they have a -1 to strength,
Oh, good.
but they rolled an 18.
So
Oh, not good.
it's 17. By 1.
No, they rolled 19 -1, 18.
Oh, right.
Oh, you already deducted it. Gotcha.
I'm still holding onto that door.
Okay.
I will try it again.
You have 2 attacks, right?
Well, yeah. Well,
You have both attack. Are you trying to instead of using an attack, just slam the door shut?
You could go big too.
Wait, yeah,
you
I'll
could go big as well.
I will go large and do it again.
And have advantage,
And
right?
have advantage on my strength checks.
All right, go large.
They feel it being pushed.
I'm like,
onwards.
no!
No!
He's like,
Stop it! And then I will re-roll.
You have
What
advantage.
advantage?
I will re-roll.
Okay.
My max is a 12. I'm re-rolling.
That would have done it.
Oh, it's a 13. Oh, okay. I'll take the 13. 13, so 17.
The 12 would have done
It
it.
doesn't matter. I will not.
Yeah, as you grow, you see the eyes widen and you shut the door.
Just no.
Cinder, what do you do?
I am going to
You see Nex as run up to and is talking to what seems to be Nex.
I'm feeling a little pecked, so I am going to cast Lesser Restoration. If that's okay.
He's like, oh my, yeah.
Yeah, it is perfectly fine. You cast Lesser Restoration on yourself. That should give you an extra. So you were on
What was your half?
22, right?
I was
22.
on 27.
What's your max HP normally?
50 plus the aid.
So 55, right?
That's
Yeah.
55.
So you were on. Okay, so you add 23 points to your health. Max
Okay.
health.
And
Your max health goes up to
23.
No, 23 plus 8. So 35.
Ooh.
No. 31. Sorry.
So my max health is 31.
31 currently.
Okay, and then I will bonus action hidden step my ability.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm invisible to the end of my next turn.
Nice.
Good.
That's what you need.
You hear Kjarpol rush and to something, and all you hear is this gasp and a thud.
She fainted.
Oh yeah,
She's not an enemy, is she?
Kjarpol? No.
No, I don't think so. She should be fine.
She's
though.
just
She'll
she's
just
reacting.
Like, oh no! You know,
Nix!
fine.
Okay. So
You
next
can jump
next
into Nix's arms.
it's like we just lands and it's like so like Is everyone else out? She looks around. Can she see Cinder down there?
No.
Oh, he's invisible. No, she cannot see
The
Cinder.
Nexus goes. Cinders was right there.
Would it be enough for her to deduce that he probably went invisible? She's seen him do it like a billion times
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
Right.
That's
She
it.
goes, all right, he's probably still there. Where's Lorcan? We need to go. I got the goods.
I don't know, but I'm hearing a lot of noise from inside.
And
She's
can I
going
ask
to run
who
over.
else doesn't have movement?
She's gonna run
Cinder.
over.
Not that he would fit through the door.
Hey, he'll make his way.
Okay.
To be
So
fair,
she'll see. Yeah. So can she see him? Is the door open on this side? Or
This
can she
no,
open it?
this door is closed.
Okay, can she
You
try
can
it? See if
open
it's
it.
open.
Because Cinder was the
Yeah.
last one through.
Next,
Okay, so
don't open that door. You don't want to open that door.
but Lorcan, she doesn't know what he's like. Where are you? She looks around. Alright.
I'm the ghost
Nyx is going
of
to-
Lorcan.
She ignores him. She was just opens at a crack to see what's happening. She doesn't want to go open it in case there's something bad on the other side, but she just
As
wants
you
to
open a
enough to
crack,
see.
you see Lorcan
you see another
large,
crack. No, I'm joking.
holding the next door closed.
Okay. So, So the door. Alright, cool. So she is gonna. She goes, Lorcan. Goes. She
Yes?
calls out to get his attention. She
What?
goes, "Let me give you a hand," and she's gonna like pull out a little flask from her bag. She's gonna shake it like a bartender. You know, it'll bubble up. It'll be like this pale kind of tincture, and she's gonna go duck, and she's gonna throw it. And this is flavor for web. She's casting web on the door. She goes duck, and it's gonna
Duck
impact
what?
the door, and it's gonna form thick webbing on the
Duck.
doorway.
I'm a large bloody creature. How am I going to duck?
She goes, ball yourself up. So puts the
Okay.
webbing on the doorway. That's her turn.
Okay, post web for me.
Yes.
Ruh-roh.
No, she put one.
Can I ask, if I touch
Ow.
the door with web there, do I get trapped in said web?
Yes. So then she goes, don't touch it.
What happens if they open it?
And they'll get stuck in the web.
Will they, or will they just open the door and
It's
still see
it's
us?
on the door. It's on the door frame. It's not on the door. It's like
Can
it's
we
like
see through a web?
depends how thick it is.
I'd say yes, but usually you can see
It's a
through
mass
a
of
web.
thick, sticky webbing, so probably not. It's not see-through. It's not like thin web.
Lorcan, give me a dexterity saving throw.
Only lightly obscure it though.
Give me a
what?
dexterity saving throw.
Oh no. Since he told me, can I get advantage?
Yes.
There you go.
I think that's
Yay!
Acrobatics?
No, dexterity saving.
Oh,
Save.
Dex. Yeah.
It's a save.
16.
Come on, Lorcan.
Meets
Nice.
beats.
Beats. It's
You take your hands off it just in time and take a step back.
just spreads and like anchors between in the door frame.
Could you not throw weird stuff around?
Nick, that's your action, correct?
No time. Run. Duck away from the door.
I can't run
That's her
yet.
turn.
Okay.
She goes, why not? She doesn't know. She's confused. She's like, she feels
don't
fine.
know.
I'm great. She runs away.
With all our movement speed.
Yeah. She'll hide here. I think she can do that.
Should hide hither.
Yeah. Okay. Alright.
All
That's her
these
turn.
are coming. Ah!
Like, she's also back to normal.
Okay, let me just see. So, 1 second. Let's see. Okay. Okay.
Alrighty.
You see that someone tries to open the door, and Larkin, you see that they didn't manage to.
What, the door's stuck now?
Yeah.
Is the door stuck?
Yeah, you hear them trying to open the door.
Like,
It didn't.
Like it's glued shut.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Now it's their turn.
I'm guessing webs are weak against, fire. Damn it.
She's going to be smart
it's not allowed to be.
and go out this way.
Which way? There's a way out that way?
The back this way. There's a back door. Great.
No, there's not a back door. Is
Window?
a window.
Hmm. Cinder has popped off to help.
I
This
know.
is-
I saw it. And Larkin, Nix, Larkin, everybody hears a big, some wood
Boom.
being broken.
Oh, no.
She would definitely hear that with a past perception
Oh yeah.
over there,
You're
right?
going the wrong way, guys.
She realizes that.
But she can't. She jumps outside. Okay. This one is going to try to open the door. She manages to open the door. So Larkin, you see as the one that tried to charm you opens the door. But you can just barely make it out through this thick web.
No.
And you see that she starts trying to like
Cut through it.
claw her way through it.
Oh, that's not good.
Does she get stuck trying to do that?
That's what we're gonna check now.
Yeah.
Leave my web alone.
He definitely does. He goes, ah! And it's not good. That brings us to Nexus. Nexus just here's the same thing you guys heard, and he and Lorcan know this place. So he goes, Nix, Cinder, follow me. Lorcan, we're going the back way. And he starts making his way and dashes. So at this point, I'm just gonna switch maps just for a second for you guys to see what I'm talking about.
A wink, wink.
So you guys came through the main road here,
Hmm.
right?
Nope. Yeah.
Through the main road here. Nexus is taking you this way and around the back streets out of there.
Yep.
Okay? Do you understand what's happening?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So with that, I'll put us
The
back
issue is.
in the brothel.
Oh, there we go.
And he dashes. So it's whether it's for you guys to be able to keep up. Lorcan, what do? You have your movement back.
I'm leaving.
All right.
But before I do that, since they're in that area, I'm going to use my breath weapon.
That's gonna destroy the web and is gonna allow them to come through.
But incapacitate them instead of
Incapacitate.
damaging them.
It's the gas.
Dead.
It's the gas. Okay.
So each creature in the cone must succeed on a con saving throw or become incapacitated.
Can you not
until the start of
flash,
the turn. Yeah, I
please?
didn't mean to. Yeah.
Alright. So cone, it would be these
DC
two.
14. It's a 15.
Con save?
15-foot cone.
Con save?
Yeah, con 14.
So this one is incapacitated.
Which one?
I'm gonna make it 1 second. And let's see this one.
I'm guessing it only hit 2 through the door.
Also incapacitated.
Hey.
Nice. Sleeping gas for the win.
Woo.
Did you angle it to get this one? That is,
I
know you
only
can't
angled
because
it towards the door.
towards the door. Yeah.
So
That's
it
fine.
only hit 2.
And then are you going to go out?
Oh yeah.
You heard what Nexus said. You're gonna go out that
I'm
way.
gonna go out, and if I see anyone,
Nyx is right there.
yeah. Will Cinder's invisibility have dropped off?
It's not his turn.
Not yet.
No. All right. Then if I can grab someone, I'll run with them.
Okay, Nyx, do you resist Lorcan picking you up?
No. She knows it's time to go. She heard Nexus.
I pick up Nyx.
Okay.
And
As you
run back.
reach to pick up Nyx, I need Cinder. Either you can do a dexterity saving throw, or you can let Lorcan feel that you're there.
Can I just say hi, Lorcan?
Hi.
Whispers into his ear.
You can feel him right in front of you.
Yeah.
Oh, then he gets picked up.
And Nyx as well?
Right,
You're a large creature, you can do that.
Can I reach Nyx from here? She's around the corner.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
You got a lot. You got reach.
Can I
'cause
pick
you're
up
big.
both of them?
You can, because you're large.
Okay.
And Nyx is small.
Yeah, I get one under each arm and leg it.
Right.
I'm a big guy,
Nice.
though.
Wow.
Yeah, but he's large.
Yeah.
I can do a strength check if I need to.
I mean, sure, if you want to, but when
I'll
you're
be
large,
fine.
when you're large, you can carry a medium creature, no matter how big it is.
Okay, no worries.
And she's small.
And she is small, so right with that.
And I finish my movement, legging it.
Yeah, the thing
I think
is,
it's about here.
even with a dash, you guys can disappear around the corner. So, I'm gonna say you got out of this.
Hey!
Hey.
So,
Thank God the cat lady didn't come after us.
he's not.
The cat lady had to go a long way around. Cat, literally cat lady, but maybe not a lady.
Oh, you mean yeah? Okay. Right. With that, we're going back to the big map. You guys run through the back streets, corner after corner. Lorcan and Nexus seem to know exactly where they're going, and they take you all the way around.
I'll just mention to Nyx on the way, hey, we've not done this a few times, have we?
Yeah, as he goes, I didn't want to be doing it right now. But I'm glad I know it. So this is going to take about 15 minutes of trying to lose them, just in case they were following. So that means that after the first minute, you need to put at least Cinder down.
Yeah, that's fine. Cinder can run on his own then.
Yeah.
His legs aren't going to fall off yet.
So
my
Let's hope so.
turn ends anyway, so
you can keep grabbing Nyx, but Cinder, are you following them?
yes.
Nyx, do you think you'll be able to keep up?
To Nyx. To. Are you asking if Cinder can keep up?
No,
It's
Nyx.
confusion.
I'm asking Nyx if she can keep up.
She goes. I should be. Like, are you gonna drop me? She's confused because you're like, she's on top of you. I'm fine. I can run.
Yeah, you can keep carrying Nyx.
No, fine.
Yeah.
I'll leave her there. It's fine.
Where are you going?
Good
Back to
question.
your house or somewhere else? Or
I don't really want to leave them straight there in case they do follow us.
do you want to go into a tavern? What do you want to do?
Try and lose their trail
sounds
somewhere.
good.
Alright.
Wait, Where would the best place
Unless
be?
you want to go this way and go to the garrison, to where you stayed the first night.
We
With the
could
guards.
report a murder.
Alright.
She attacked me. I did not. It was self-defense, okay?
We could also report the missing people because there seems to not have been an investigation. Anyone?
Are we
She
in
goes,
this area?
I need a few
No,
moments.
we're in this area still.
Yeah, I found some interesting things in the office. If you give me a moment, I can go through them. There could be evidence.
You guys are still in the same district. Nexus is like, guys, we can't stay here. Let's decide where
Keep
we're going.
Let's go. Let's go a pub.
Right. So you guys will go.
Study it there, and it's a bit busy, so it'll keep us covered.
Yeah, you guys run over and you make your way to your regular tavern.
Our regular, right?
It's a bustling tavern. It's called Tooth and Claw Tavern, and
Talking about claws.
it's just bustling. It's
Oh.
it's starting to be dinner time. People are coming in. It's not like the rowdiest place, but there's people like arm wrestling with bets in one of the corners. There's a bard singing in the corner, in the opposite corner of the tavern. There's people coming in.
What time of day is it? Sorry.
It's around 4 o'clock, 4 or 5.
Decent time. Yeah, I was just going to mention we're still waiting for a certain fan to show up as well.
Yes, he's
wait.
arrived at the city. He's making his way to you now.
Hey!
He was going to arrive this evening.
Right. So Nix, what did you find then? You said you found
Do you
stuff?
guys order anything at the bar?
4 meads.
Hey, you find a table? You find a table. He goes, long time no see. Coming right up. And yep, you sit down and you ask Nix.
She goes, Yes? She looks at Cinder.
I would like to hold my staff up and cast Lesser Restoration on both Nyx and Lorcan.
Hey.
Alright.
What does that
She
take
blinks, is like,
down to?
Fixes.
Your health goes back to max plus 5.
She just noticed that she was so focused on the job that she didn't realize she was feeling off until he removed it. It's like, thank you. Right. And she reaches into the bag and pulls out the ledger. And she kind of puts it and goes, 1 second. And she kind of she'll flick through it just to get a general idea of what's in it before she.
So the ledger you got 2 ledgers, right? You got the one.
This is the ledger in behind the shield. No, she's going.
The letter.
The letter.
Not a ledger. All right.
Because I said letter and then you said. I must have misheard. It's fine.
Okay, so you took some ledgers from the desk, 2 ledgers from the desk, and a letter, a thick letter from.
The letter.
From the shield, from behind the shield. So behind the shield, in your letter, what languages do you speak?
Great. It's probably like an infernal or a common, Elvish, Gnomish, and Halfling. It's kind of the decode this shit.
Okay, what languages does everyone speak? Maybe somebody can recognize it.
Draconic and Giant.
Common, Sylvan, and speech of beast and leaf.
Okay, so I don't think anybody knows.
We can read it. It's devilish script.
Let me
Right.
see if I have comprehend languages.
But
Nope.
yes, but there's one letter with 1 script. There's another letter. There's 2 pages. Sorry, the letter has 1 page. The second page was clearly the same script, but written by somebody else. and there's a map.
Huh. A map.
A map.
Ooh, a map.
Yeah, she like shows them that.
Right. Anybody who wants to try to figure out where this map is from can either give me a history or a survival roll.
Okay. History.
Yeah, history.
Hotness.
Terrible.
I got a 10. That's terrible.
Survival 19.
Yeah. Let him do it, because
Yeah,
I
let him
rolled
do it.
terribly as well.
Right, Cinder, you look at the map and you know you recognize.
11.
You've seen this before. You've seen this layout of the land because in this map, the only thing marked is terrain and an X.
The raid. Okay.
So there's no names of anything, but you've seen this before. Cinder, you used to walk around the freelands a lot, healing people. Your maps didn't usually show you, cities or country borders like most people are used to. You used to read terrains, so you recognize it. And I will take us to the world map. And I will
World map.
draw
Bro.
the area that is in the map, that is drawn on the map, that Cinder identified.
Cool.
I'm going to one second.
Yeah, no. I was just curious of how you're going to draw. You just going to do a square arrow.
So this, didn't mean to do that one. So this is the map that Cinder sees. Cinder turns it around for it to fit what he's realized it is. And the reason he recognizes this far up is because you guys have been given a map that you looked at previously of this same area.
Similar.
But there was a crevice there, right?
There is a hole there.
Does this one show the hole?
No.
Gosh darn.
Instead of the hole, it shows an X,
X.
where you would expect the hole that Akra explained to you is there.
Oh,
Nix, Lorcan, Nexus. This looks like where we needed to go through the mountains, but there was this big hole on the map. Where's that other map at? Do we have that?
You do. Lorcan has it.
Yes, here you go.
Compare it. Like cross-reference it quick. You should kind of like.
It's literally like the map that Akra gave you. I will draw the map that Akra gave you. The map that Akra gave you shows you
Why were these people chasing us, by the way?
this much.
Sheesh. That's a big area right there.
Does it show any more detail on that smaller map?
Just terrain.
And I'm guessing ours just shows terrain as well.
Yours shows roads and the country and the towns on the way to the wastelands. Everything else is kind of like basic.
Oh, so it doesn't show terrain.
It shows
So-
the mountains, but that's it.
Nix, do you think this X marks where something was going to strike the land and create the hole?
Could she assume that? Was that like a good educated guess, or is he too? Is it something
I'm
that he
not
might have
gonna
missed? Could she roll for it?
I'm
Or
gonna
is it
say
obvious?
Cinders. It's not obvious. You guys don't know what the letters say. So you don't.
I only have a 10 intelligence, so.
No, but it sounds plausible. Like it's possible that that's what it is. You're not sure. Let me just check something real quick.
Or there's a pot of gold where the X is. Or gems.
I'm a little concerned that my intelligence level is the same as Cinder's.
And I have brain damage. What's your excuse?
Lorcan,
Yeah.
can you give me a history check
I can. That. That was an overall 9.
Okay.
Not a good one.
No, do you want to use a reroll or are you going to leave it?
Leave it. It's on a history.
Okay.
What? Do you want me to re-roll everyone?
No, it's not up to me.
I'm asking.
I could give him a reroll point. Try
No,
again.
I can use one. I'm asking if you think I
You want
should.
to? Oh, you're gonna use your own? I mean, the more information, the better. That's what Nix would
Alright,
say.
it's of course it is. Alright. I will delve into my head. And get a 20. Dirty 20.
30-20. So at first you didn't notice, but among the script
Nice.
that you don't understand, there is one thing you do understand on the map.
Oh,
On the corner of the map,
yes.
like the letter is all in different script, so you didn't even like look at it twice. But on the corner of the map, there is something in giant.
In giant?
Mhm.
What?
It is.
Are we talking about the small map or the big map?
The small map.
Okay.
It is a sigil that you recognize as the symbol for king.
Symbol
Okay.
King.
Well, it does say there might be a king in giant, though, guys. There's king here.
That's on the corner of the map.
Yeah.
Like in this corner.
Interesting. Do you think why have they marked the location of this? Do you guys, where do you get this next?
She goes, well, I don't know what you guys found out outside. I don't know what happened with Cinder, but
No,
the
no one knows.
management is more than it appears. I think a little bit of show and tell is gonna help better than just explaining it. So she's just gonna go, one moment. She's gonna like look around and she's going to reach into the bag and she's gonna pull out the longsword and show him the handle. Anything
Pretty
odd
weapon.
about the handle? She shows him it.
Is it made to
It's
attack people's feet?
Like
Is
it's
it-
backwards, the handle.
That's a
Backwards.
poorly
Is it made
made
for
sword.
stabbing? Maybe.
You could say it could be a poorly made sword, but there's only, as far as I can think of, what I read is there's only one fiendish creature that fits the mark, and it's a Rakshasa. She like whispers it, so no one, like it's not like everyone hears it.
I don't
They're
know
like
what it is.
What's that?
uh she goes, well, they're like, well, they're a fiend, but they usually their natural form is of a tiger-like humanoid with hands that are backwards.
Oh, okay.
But they usually disguise themselves as influential
You
people
said
in
fiends,
society.
right? There were fiends there?
Well, that was the trace of one. I'm not sure. What did you guys find? She looks at Cinder and Lorcan, and well, not Nexus because Nexus is outside.
Methis is just like,
What's happening?
Well, I spoke to, oh god, what's her name again?
careful.
Kiarple. And apparently a couple of weeks ago, there was a mass death or murder at this place. But it wasn't investigated by any guard or anything like that. It was just known that they all died. She was lucky because it was just her and the owner who survived. She was lucky because it was a day off, and I don't know how the owner did if she was there.
Hmm. All right. Cinder, what did you
Well,
find out anything?
uh,
What
uh,
were you doing? What was your
well,
distract? That was a lot of noise. That was a
uh,
lot.
um, um, so I walked out into the area with no clothes on, and I flirted with the singing tiefling
The
woman,
dancing, the
dancing,
dancing dragonborn.
dancing
Dancing
Sorry,
dragonborn,
Well, that's a good name for a pub.
and
the dancing tiefling.
she did something to me that, well, she was really charming, So I told her I would meet her in the bath, and I went in there, and she came in, and she tried to kiss me, and I was like, no, I'm only for Nyx. And then she
It's like you recoils a bit, like. Huh?
she tried. It turned out her kiss would have killed me, right? So then I kind of killed her.
What?
So I'm sorry. 1 second. Was she? So she tried to kiss you, but
You
was she
killed
actually a
her?
dragonborn,
Did
or
she see
she
you?
was? What did she
No,
look
no.
like?
Oh, I'm sorry. She
You killed her.
changed. She
What?
changed. To be honest, she kind of looked hot. But she tried to kill me, so I had to kill her.
How is a kiss trying to kill you?
I don't know. She did something to me, and she attacked me and
Like, in a good way?
almost
Nah,
killed me. Right? I mean, I was down to my last 8 breaths.
Perhaps.
and so I spit water on her and electrocuted
we
her.
don't need to know your little fetishes. It's fine.
And I
No, no, no.
electrocuted her.
So
Oh.
she was a she was she makes like she pulls out her
She hurt my
annotation.
brain. And as
So
we
you almost
all
like
know, my brain can't take much more damage.
so you most
So
likely
that's why
charmed.
they were chasing us out, because you killed someone.
Oh, they didn't chase us
What?
out. I rushed us out. They might have chased Nyx out. She came out a window. But, yeah, Nyx, what were you doing? You never brought me any massage or anything like that.
She rolls her eyes.
Next
Well, thank
is
you for the
looking between
insight.
the two of them, like
What the
She
hell?
looks at Nexus.
I'll hold up the
She
bowl of
goes,
fruit and I'll
"Later."
say, there's grapes in this bowl, Nyx. Later.
She goes later. Business first.
And I'll look at
Nexus is
I'll
like,
look at Nexus and
what
go,
did I miss?
She goes, "Do you want a quick summary or do you want the whole?" She looks at him. She goes,
I don't think I want to know.
"Okay, then don't ask questions you don't want to know the answers to."
So you two are.
No, she goes, no. She goes, no. I asked him for a distraction, and he wanted me to feed him grapes. So,
oh,
do it.
she also offered to massage me.
No.
Yeah,
She
good
like
luck.
shakes her head
You
vigorously.
know, I mean, there was nudity. There was a bath.
Unfortunately, there was on his part. She-
and and you know what? I even ate a banana for her. Sexually.
I think that might have been the worst part. I might have nightmares about that one. She looks at Nexus just pale.
Next, just like, can we go
Okay.
back to the map and what's happening?
Anyway,
Mhm.
oh no, wait. So there was it a demon, an enemy then?
Yeah, Cinder, you remember that she suddenly grew a tail and
Wings.
horns and wings. Yeah.
Yeah, I think would Cinder have known what she was?
Cheers.
Give me a nature or arcana check.
Can Nix, from his descriptions, try and piece it together as well?
You can
From what
also
she's
give
read in
me,
the
in
journals?
your case, a history or arcana.
Hello.
Oh man, I suck at them all here. I'm gonna use my inspiration on that.
I would as well.
Put down
Okay.
some.
Arcana.
Oh!
You get another. Hey, you
27.
can have my inspiration. It's fine.
No, I don't want it.
I got a 27.
The dice have a story to tell. They're just not telling me.
Cinder doesn't.
So Cinder's like, I don't know. She has like horns and tail and wings.
She
It's really
had
weird.
this.
It freaked me out.
She had this
And it-
nice top that really showed her features.
All he knows
And she tried
is.
to.
Yeah,
And
he was
the-
looking.
and she
He
tried
was
to-
looking at the chest area.
Yeah. And she tried to kiss you? Is that what she was trying to do? Like, she was trying to, like, please. Like, she charmed you and
She wanted this.
tried to kiss you?
Don't be jealous, Nix.
Oh.
Don't be jealous. I didn't let her.
I'll try not to be. Just like, that was a 27 Arcana.
Yeah.
With that, she pieces it together. She's like, that was probably a succubus, for the sounds of it.
A sucky what?
You're lucky to be alive, actually.
I know they were in a brothel, but
She looks at Lorcan and rolls her eyes. Yes, I guess it's appropriate. Yes, she's wisdom save. Terrible. 9. That is
So next is
10,
good.
11,
So she
12,
sucked you
13.
to Cinder.
She
But you what?
sucked my brains.
Oh, that must not.
It
be
is
right.
easy access. Look, and I'll take out a piece of my brain.
oh no, oh.
Wait, we're in a public. Please put it back in.
Fine.
And you see that you hear like mugs fall. The person that was bringing your meat just drops on the
No
mug.
brains at the table.
I really
Oh,
gave
Oh no,
her.
no! It's.
I really
It's a
gave
special
her a
effect.
piece of my
It's-
mind.
And he drops all the mugs of ale,
like
and he
that.
goes, I'm sorry, I'll bring more. And you see he's gonna go in a way a bit wobbly.
And
It
at
is
that
not
moment,
in public.
if I may, my left eye is going to say to my right side eye, between us, something smells.
What? What?
That's my pun for the night.
Oh no.
Get it? Because my nose.
I'm too tired to get that so quick.
Nick's just
I
blinked.
got it. I had got it.
Your right eye, left eye is still covered, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. But
Oh.
it's not muffled. It can still talk.
Anyway,
Nyx is trying to not have a aneurysm from the part. It's like. zzz.
But back to the subject. Wait. So there was demons. Is that what this map's about then? Do you think that hole has something to do with the demons, or the what do you call them?
I mean, that could be a very healthy deduction.
Maybe it's a
I'm not
hell
sure.
mount. Wait, what's a
A
hell
what?
mount? I don't know. A hell mount?
Do you really
You
think
know,
we should go
a
this
place
way?
that
There could be demons?
spews devils.
If there's a place that spews devils, we're not going there. All right. We should go the opposite direction. You just point that out.
It'd be fun.
I agree. That would be
Fine.
fun.
But at least we know that there's a place that's spewing devils. But we'll have to try and find a way. Wait, it was quickest to go that way though, wasn't it?
yep.
Yes.
How about we get a load of invisibility stuff in case?
You are in a metropolis.
I can certainly work on that if you wish.
What's the best way we can get through there?
Fly over it. Or around it.
Can we all fly?
Maybe we
You
can
fly.
rent a ship. An airship. Do they have airships in this world above table?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I
think they
never
do.
I don't think
I don't
so.
think you've thought
Oh.
about it.
They don't have airships.
Well,
Thought you did.
Nix, I have this great concept for a flying vessel. If I draw it up, can you tinker it together?
Yes, a hot air balloon that's going to take us in the wrong direction. Just what we need.
I'll quickly draw it up and it'll just be scribbles.
It'd probably be faster for me to make potions that allow us to fly or to be unnoticed than build you an airship. I could build you a toy one if you smart.
Can you make it big enough to fly and then make it cast fly on it?
And she's like,
Nix,
one step at a time. She's like getting overwhelmed.
Nix,
Like,
give me a history check.
gross. Brain isn't working. 14.
Okay.
Could I have guided myself? Oh, it's just a spur of the moment thing.
You can guide yourself, yeah.
Awesome, cool. Thank you. I wasn't sure. Hey, 16.
You remember one of the brief when you studied up Dylan that there was something he made that was disregarded by the rest of the world. It was considered a failure, but you never paid too much attention to it because there's very little about it. Though at the time when you studied it, you didn't really believe that he had failed at an invention like that. But it was a type of ship that wasn't for water.
There was a ship.
There was a type of ship that Dylan made up that wasn't for water, but was considered by most people to be a failure, and there's very little about it that you remember.
Would she know where? So there's not enough known about it. Like where?
No, but I believe it wasn't it your background that tells you that you can know information even if you don't know it. So you're in a metropolis. There's bound to be a library here that can tell you what you want to know.
She looks at Cinder and she's like, "You make it like Cinder. It's gonna take time." And she goes, "Actually, if you give me maybe a bit of time, I can probably scrounge up some information here.
Okay,
Maybe find us a mode of transport."
Just a quick reminder, I'm dying. So
Yeah.
It's not gonna be weeks. It's gonna be a tiny bit of time to save us a lot of time. Is that okay? She
Yeah.
looks at
People
Cinder.
suddenly the guy comes back and tentatively puts meat in front of each one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have
Much
apple
obliged.
cider instead, please? I don't drink
No,
alcohol.
you'll drink that. It's fine.
No,
No, that can be a second drink.
please.
I would say bring him a bandage for his head.
Or
No,
some
but-
cotton stuff in there.
And he goes away. Nix, however, you don't know the city well.
She's gonna need a guide. She looks to Nexus. Any archives here? I assume
That's
so.
his department. He points to Lorcan.
What do you mean?
Looks at
mine?
Lorcan. Any archives here?
He's the
What
one that
archives?
studied. I don't
Like
study.
the guard archives, passenger archives.
Like a repository of knowledge, like a library.
But
Oh.
repository of what? Library.
She's like-
library. Yes, gotcha.
A
That
place
one.
of learning? She's like going through the motions.
I
No,
took
I've
a
got the
suppository.
library.
Well, you had
I know
books?
library.
Yes, you do know library.
Books, yes.
Lorcan, give me. Okay. Give me a history check.
He's got 10 intelligence, not 5.
Oh no.
So
But the repository is still like what?
Lorcan
very-
knows where
yeah.
a suppository is?
A suppository? Isn't that where you stuff things in? No, wait, what's that?
No. Repository, not that. She
Alright.
glares at Cinder.
What was it? History, did you
Yes.
say? 13, 16.
16. So, you think about it, and you're like, I mean, there's an archives of like war techniques and military stuff in the Gotch place, but you know that in between the walls, so like in the outer wall, there is a grand library for like general stuff.
What sort of thing do you need? Do you need like war memorabilia, tactics? Do you need general spells?
He would be more likely inventions, constructs, anything to do with
I'll class
Dallin.
that as general.
I mean, sure.
And yeah, so I will point out on the map where the big library is.
You don't have a map
You
of
don't
the
have a map?
city.
Damn, we need a map of the city. But yeah. Right, well yeah,
Okay.
shall we go there? Wait, what time is it? It's late.
It's getting to sunset.
Shall we
We
find
should
a
probably-
place to sleep and go
We
tomorrow?
should rest and then go. Yeah.
I wonder if they have a room here actually. Or do we have a room already? No, we don't.
No, you don't. Yeah, this is a tavern inn thing.
So what's this? We will get the room. But just make sure
Alright.
you keep your possessions close by.
Do you,
Mhm.
Nick? You also took a spell scroll. You didn't look at it yet.
She did.
You wanna
No,
do
she was waiting to finish explaining. She was going to look at it and use detect magic, like ritual cast it if she
Okay.
needs to. Yeah.
that. Give me first an Arcana check.
Okay. She will do that.
Also, Nick, speaking of possessions, I need money.
She's like, wait, this like. So that wasn't the best roll with guidance. Would you say that I could do the detect magic first, or the Arcana first?
The Arcana first.
Okay. Great. 5 plus. That would have been 13. It was a very bad roll.
This scroll, whatever it is way above your pay grade.
Hmm. All right, I need a moment. She looks at it, she can't scrutinize it, like she can't decipher it. She'll ritual cast detect magic.
Maybe it conjures a ship that.
Oh well, if we're
flies.
resting, she'll just use detect magic straight away.
No, it's fine. You ritual cast. So you guys have time. Lorcan is probably gonna
Great.
uh
And find the rooms.
you're going to sort the rooms out. Alexis goes with you. Just for a quick reminder, you guys have up to 3rd level spells right now, right?
Do we?
They do.
I
Well,
don't.
he doesn't. Only Cinder does.
Cinder does, but what about you, Nix? What's your highest spell?
Second level.
Second.
Artificers.
Okay. So yeah, so
pick
this
up
is
slowly.
way above your pay grade. This is when you cast detect magic, there's a strong enchantment aura. Coming from
What enchantment? Okay.
enchantment.
The staff lets me cast up to level 5 for
Yeah,
mass cure wounds and
yeah, actually, but you're a sorcerer, right?
yes.
Divine soul sorcerer. So you're also arcane.
Hmm.
You also use arcane magic. Cinder, you can roll me an Arcana check if you want to have a look at this.
But my Arcana
she's-
is +0.
But you
So
can
she
try.
goes. So I'm not sure what it is, but it's got a strong sense of enchantment. Could she give him advantage with that bit of knowledge she got from the aura? I guess you can like show that to him.
Okay.
She'll guide him as well.
That would help.
So
Advantage with
Cinder. Gross. Oh, that's the.
No, that's his guidance.
That's the default.
Oh, it didn't show my other roll. I rolled a 12 Arcana. So 12, 15.
With advantage.
15.
Yeah.
Advantage.
Meets beats. So you look at it and you're like, this is a spell that modifies someone's memory. You're not sure how it works. It's very powerful. Yeah.
Well, okay.
You wouldn't be. You would struggle to cast it, basically.
Well, I can't. I would never be able to cast it anyway.
No, I'm saying to say. But you know, it is a magic that modifies someone's memories.
Interesting.
Sorcerer
Next looks at
magic?
Cinder.
No.
I believe it helps to modify memory somehow. I don't really know a whole lot about it, but I can tell that the runes written on it speak to modifying someone's memory somehow.
Oh wow. I'm not there.
Okay. Well done, Cinder. Thank you. She's gonna make a note of that.
Right. So Cinder's so proud.
He sticks his tongue out at Nexus.
Nexus is not there.
As he sticks his tongue out at Nexus, he goes, "Here, have a grape." She throws a grape into his mouth.
Wait, acrobatic shot.
Right, soon enough, Lorcan, you paid. You need to pay. I believe it's 1 silver piece for all of you to stay one night.
Oh, that's good.
Sorry, one gold. The equivalent of 1 gold piece in gems, not silver. 1 gold. For all of you to stay is about. I think it's about 2, so it adds up to more or less 1 gold, and with the food as well. So you pay for it. You all can stay the night.
Not bad.
And with you going to have a long rest,
Yay.
we're going to leave it there for today.
And level up. Yay. No, I'm kidding. Like, no, look at her face.
Hey,
like, no.
I killed the succubus.
You did great. No, you guys are definitely doing progress. Just remember that every time you level up, it'll take longer for the next level up.
Yeah, I know.
So not yet.
It was just, I was just fishing for it.
Praying.
I was expecting.
I know. But you guys did great today.
Before we go,
yeah.
Can Cinder get money from Nyx?
Oh yes, you wanted to do that.
Nyx,
She
I need
looks
some
at him.
pocket money.
She goes,
I'm broke.
"What happened? Did you not have your own savings?"
I forgot something. Actually, good point. As you say that, Cinder, you hear the doors to the tavern burst open, and you see this beautiful white winged wolf.
Hey!
Fang!
Just turns.
Why don't you? Don't freak anyone out at all.
People stop and look and then see that it strides very happily and starts licking Cinder, and everybody kind of
Oh.
Oh.
It comes with 2 pouches around its.
Oh, for me? Thank you, Fang.
Fang looks at all of you and goes, "The tavern has been lucrative."
Oh. Oh, this is
You
money.
see-
Does everybody in the tavern we're in understand what he said, or is it coming out to them as dog speak?
No, it's everybody understands.
Wait, is he speaking in our heads? Or...
No, he speaks. Oh, that's true. He does speak telepathically when you're within 30 feet of him. So yeah, let's say that.
Oh.
So Cinder, as you take the pouches, you guys, because it's been a week, there's a letter there for you guys, which we'll go over next time. But let's just check something. You have you have around 50, the correspondent of 50 gold in each pouch. 100 gold pieces worth of gems.
Wow. In a week or 2. Nice.
50 gold and 100
week.
gems?
Huh? No, 100 gold in gems, so 50 in each pouch.
Oh, okay.
15 each pouch.
I'm keeping mine, Nyx. I need spending money. Daddy gotta eat.
She goes, you don't. She goes. First of all, she doesn't know what it was at first. But here's the jingling of the gems. She goes, Cinder, we need to divide that equally. She looks at him. You'll get your pocket money, but we need to just. But we'll leave it.
Just to clarify, they are uncut gems, so
Uncut
that's
gems.
why they're so big pouches. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Mm.
Okay.
Sorted.
Fine,
For
we'll
now,
split
Cinder,
'em.
you have 100 gold pieces in gems, and then you guys can sort it between each other next time.
Mm.
Oh.
I forgot that Fang was meant to arrive today.
Alright then.
There you go. Fang is
Well, there you
back.
go.
And for those who have joined us more recently and don't know who Fang is, I'll put him, I'll show him to everyone.
I just see his. Oh, hang on.
You need to click on bio and info.
Yeah, I know.
Our beautiful Fang.
Yeah. That's my puppy.
That's your
Brought him
puppy.
his allowance.
He is a celestial wolf. So, with that, thank you everybody for watching. We do have a game tomorrow night. 8-year saga with our amazing Raza as the draconic DM. We have an aftermath of a complicated battle to resolve.
And a special start time.
With a special
And a
start time,
special
it's gonna
start
start an
time.
hour earlier, 7 p.m. EST. So tune in for that. We also have a game on Discord, which is our amazing Captain Crit's version of Princess of the Apocalypse called Elemental Chaos, which is on Friday at 10 a.m. EST. So we're gonna have, and then next week we have a bunch of games as well. There's stuff happening on the Discord, so if you want to know everything that's going on, join our Discord. The link is in the chat.
Check the events.
Check the events. Check the threads that people have put up for games, and you'll learn everything you need to know. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for the continuation of this adventure. And who knows, maybe a surprise in 2 weeks' time might be happening. So I say maybe, so I don't want to get everybody's hopes up. So thank you all for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all, amazing players, and good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye.
Night. Hope you enjoyed the plot twist.
Bye.
Hope we didn't